This is Jocko podcast number 417 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
I have to think about everything happening around me outside the car, like when to come in for a pit stop and what kind of stop I'm making, whether it's a short stop or a long stop, changing tires or just adding fuel, or adjustments I want made to the car in my next pit. I'm thinking about where the other drivers are on the track and the order we're all driving in, who's a lap down and who I'm racing against. Whom will I risk driving next to, especially if they are behind me in the standings? There's a lot happening inside the car too. I'm constantly adjusting my suspension, monitoring all my engine functions, and adjusting my fuel mixture, switching between full power and various conversion levels according to the fuel strategies. When you drive an open cockpit car, there's a constant deluge of flying debris, including rubber from the tires, often referred to as marbles, exhaust fumes, oil on the track, stones or pebbles, and so on. Everything on the track becomes a potential hazard and a problem when it comes to seeing while I drive. Several times during the race, I remove tear-offs, which are layered plastic-like protectors that sit on top of polycarbonate shield on my helmet to protect my eyes. With all this going on and so much more, I have to keep my mind clear so I can focus on what I have to do that day to compete, let alone win. One mistake can cost me the race, or worse. Racing is a rhythm, a cacophony of thought, skill, and teamwork. There was a lot riding on this race. I knew I had what it would take to give the boys a good challenge. Like every other race of my career, I had something to prove. And that right there is an excerpt from the book called Danica, Crossing the Line, which is written by Danica Patrick, a race car driver who's raced everything from go-karts to Formula Fords to IndyCars to NASCAR. And she's the most successful woman in the history of American open wheel car racing. And it's a pleasure to have Danica here with us tonight to discuss her experiences and lessons learned. Danica.
Jocko.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I love that intro.
Well, that's a badass intro.
We have a lot going on in the car.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And then you think about the danger and that. How much are you thinking about danger? How much when you're strapping in to your vehicle, how much are you thinking about getting killed?
A little, or at least hurt. So yeah, I always prayed before I went out for safety, and that the angels would like surround my car and take care of me. But then once I'm out there, nothing. Yeah.
I've had a bunch of people on the podcast, a bunch of combat veterans, and I had one guy on his name was Dean Ladd. He was in the Marine Corps in World War II. And he did multiple island campaigns over in the Pacific where the Marine Corps was taking massive casualties. And he was on, I think it was his third island he was going into. It was the island of Tarawa. And we were talking about as he was getting ready to go in, and they're on the little landing craft. And he's talking about, I'm reading from a book that he had written, and I'm reading it, and I look up at him, I'm like, I said, how are you thinking about getting wounded or killed while this is happening? And he goes, no, that's going to happen to the other guy. And
that's such a cooler answer.
It's such a common thing for military, like young military people, that you think that people can get wounded and killed, but you don't think it can be you. And then I think some guys get older and they start realizing that that's just not true and that they can get it too. So I don't know. I imagine when you're younger, you're maybe you're a little bit more cavalier, or maybe you think about it less. But certainly, you saw enough people get hurt or killed over your career,
100%,
where you had to start thinking about like, hey, this could be me next time.
When I started my 2006 season, my teammate died in the morning warm-up that morning, and then we didn't race that day as a team. The rest of the series raced, but as a team we didn't. And then my very last race in Las Vegas, when I was full-time in IndyCar before I went to NASCAR, Dan Weldon was killed on lap 11, and I was almost part of it. I remember feeling like I really obviously wanted to win my last race. and I was fast. I think I might have been fastest in practice. And I thought, I know I'm going to have to do some really dumb things if I'm going to win, because there's just a lot of dumb stuff going on out there right now. There were a lot of drivers that just weren't really super respectful of each other and weren't as familiar with oval racing because it was an oval, and just didn't really follow the rules, the unspoken rules. And I talked to my dad, and he was like, look, you don't have anything to prove. You go out there and you drive like yourself. You don't have anything to prove. And I'm glad he said that, because I went out there and we were starting lap 11, and this car came in front of me and just like cut me off. And my mindset before my dad talked to me was like, anything, you just got to stick it in there. You just got to be aggressive, and you just got to crash people, whatever. So I lifted, and it's my instinct anyway. So I'm not 100% sure I could have overcome the instinct, but I went into the race with a little bit of a different mindset than I previously had, the day before. And that car in front of me was part of this enormous crash in turns 1 and 2 that killed Dan. And so the car in front of me was caught up in it. He spun off and crashed. Almost everyone behind me did too. It was like we did one more lap around because they just couldn't red flag the race quick enough. And it was like a movie scene. There was just chunks of bodywork on fire. There was just cars everywhere. It truly looked like a Hollywood movie scene from a race.
Yeah, I want to say, this is off the top of my head, but I watched that crash. I want to say 15 cars were involved in the crash and 19 weren't. You were one of the 19 that weren't, but that's almost half the field.
That sounds about right. That's most of the field. Yeah. So anyway, it was obviously a very, very, very sad day, traumatic day. Dan died on impact, really, and blunt head trauma. And, other drivers saw it. I mean, some drove by it. Some got out of their cars and literally saw him. And then we waited around for the decision, and we did one sort of parade lap together and in memory, and we didn't race at all that day. That was it. So mortality is something that, what's the benefit of it? That's a real question, when you're young, you're fearless, you're not thinking about dying. I wonder about why it starts creeping in. I really didn't think about how dangerous the sport was until I was done, because it wasn't productive before that. It wasn't like I was unaware, but I remember I retired in 2018. In 2019, I was on pit road, and I was commentating for the race, so I was sitting next to Mike Tirico, and it passes off to the booth, which is where the play-by-play happens. And I'm sitting down there, and I'm finally having the first opportunity to like grab something, a snack or something to drink. And I'm like snacking on these apple chips as like the front, like the start of the race is coming. The cars are coming at us at 200 miles an hour for the green flag. And I, at that point, went, oh my God, these guys are crazy. I can't believe I did this. And now I know why my friends that came to my first Indy 500 were like, at that point I'm only 23, and they thought, we can't believe you're in that car out there doing that. Like it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And it just doesn't. It's so crazy what we're capable of as humans, and almost like in a non-thought way. I don't know if the things that you did were like that, but there's so much that just happens. It's like coming through you. Because if I had to think about it, even if I had to think about something simple like a pit stop, it's so complicated, all the little things that you have to do and the moments and the turn and the clutch and the brake and all the, just like sequencing that was so overwhelming. But when you did it, you did it.
Yeah. I would have a similar thing going up to like if we're doing a target assault, like a direct action mission. And as we're rolling up to the target, so you're maybe 5 minutes away, so it's about to happen. And that's when I would be thinking through, and that's when I would be worried. And what I'd be worried about is I'd be worried about one of my guys getting hurt or killed. That's what I'd be worried about. And you'd be thinking, oh, did we come up with the right plan? Are we doing this the right spot? What's the enemy going to do? Are we prepared? But then as soon as we got there, and I would say execute on the radio, and the thing starts, you're not thinking about anything but getting the job done and just reacting off what's in front of you and making decisions. But you're not overly thinking the decisions. You're just kind of making them almost instinctually based on the things that you've known and the things that you've learned and the training that you've done. So yeah, there's definitely some similarities there. I've heard this expression for the first time the other day. Thinking about walking upstairs. Like if you think about walking upstairs, it's hard.
Oh my God, this is so true. It's totally happened to me. I actually think about it with down, and I have this weird thought. I'm like, why is this creeping in that I like need to be careful for my step and think about my walking downstairs? And I thought, is this some like subconscious awareness of like maybe in the future I won't be able to walk upstairs well or something? But I thought, why am I thinking about this? And when you don't think about it, it's so much. It just happens.
Easier. Yeah, so much easier. And people get caught up, and I'm sure you could get caught up in driving where if you're thinking about what you're doing, it's going to cause a problem. Whereas if you just do what you without really thinking about it, it's going to be easier.
Why is that?
I guess because that computer system in our head already sort of has a protocol to follow. And when we start interrupting it with new thoughts, it just throws it off.
Yeah. And maybe it takes from assessing what else is going on. So the autopilot of the muscle memory and the programming of something simple like walking down steps, or even just, what you do when you jump out of the car and you're going into combat. Like you know all those things, you've practiced those things a bunch. And so what you don't have then, if you're thinking about it, is your extrasensory to deal with the new.
Because that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
You know how to do everything else.
Exactly.
You know the patterns, and there's one little deviation from the pattern. That's what you got to contend with. Not all the other stuff you already know how to do. Yeah. All right. Well, good little. We already deviated here a little bit. All right. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning. So you're born where? Wisconsin?
Technically, yes.
But then you grew up in.
I grew up in Illinois. So I was born in Beloit, Wisconsin, but we lived in South Beloit, Illinois. So it was just the closest hospital. But yeah, grew up right on the border in the middle of cornfields.
And what'd your mom do what was she?
So my mom and dad met on a blind date at a snowmobile race when they were in their early 20s, very early 20s. And my mom was actually at the racetrack because she was helping out a friend that was a girl that was racing, and she was in charge of putting the studs in the belt of the snowmobile. She was named Captain Traction. So my dad had a blind date with Captain Traction, and they hit it off, and I came along, and so racing is just totally in our family. And my dad was racing at the time, snowmobiles. He raced snowmobiles, midgets, motocross. So he loved it. Knew how to do it.
What did he do for a living?
He ended up being a glazer, so he would install windows in buildings. Like 2-story buildings at the most. And
but he's like commercial. A gearhead his whole life?
But totally racing, yeah. He knows how to build anything. He built a sled from scratch. Like he can do it. He could rebuild the clutches. That's actually what he does now. He has a carbon fiber business, and he balances clutches and builds carbon fiber parts for cars and clutch covers that are carbon fiber.
And so
he's super handy. And so my mom, you asked what she did. She was so they met really young. So she really didn't do much, but she went to school for accounting. So she was an accountant, and then that ended. And she lived in northern Minnesota then. And so my dad grabbed her and took her downtown to Wisconsin. So yeah, they got married in 1980. So they were in their early 20s.
And so your dad's a gearhead building stuff, and he built you a go-kart. Is that right? Is that the way it went
together?
Down?
He put it together. We bought the go-karts, and then he built
with these
everything.
Like standard like Sears go-karts type things out of the gate, or they're a little bit more hyped up?
No, they're hyped up. Oh,
your
yeah,
dad was a little bit hyped up out of the gate.
And actually, the very first time I drove a go-kart, I crashed.
What went down?
Well, Dad screwed up. So he got them built. My sister started at the same time, because actually it was my sister who wanted to race, not me. I've realized.
She's older than you or younger than you?
2 years younger.
Okay.
So she was 8 and I was 10. And what I've realized as I've grown up is that I really, it's not always my idea, but I'm up for it. Mm-hmm. Like I'm up for the challenge. I'm up for the. I love to know. I love to like. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I really love to push my comfort zone. But it's not always my idea. So anyway, so Brooke wanted to race, and the go-karts are ready. So we went out in this back parking lot, and my dad put like big, spray cans, WD-40 brake cleaner, like made a big circle with all the cans, and was like, all right, girls, go around. And so we're going around the circle, and I went to hit the brake, and it fell to the floor, like there was nothing there. And so there's a cotter pin that came out of the lever, and so it just, there had no attachment. And so I'm 10 and have no idea what I'm doing. So I just go straight and I'm like, oh no, I'm in a crash. I'm going to die. And anyway, so I'm headed towards this construction truck. You know, construction trailer. You know, they're kind of higher. They're more elevated. Well, it was about yay high, which is neck height. And I was headed right for that. And at the last second, I veered over and hit a concrete wall head on. And like my arms fly back and my arm lands on the exhaust and burns my cool puffy jacket. And like I bruise my legs all up the inside because there's uprights that attach to the steering column. And that's where the fuel tank is in between your legs right there. So like I flew forward after I came back and like bruised my legs. And so my dad came over and guess what he did?
Fix the brakes and put you back in it?
He bought a new go-kart.
Okay.
Literally, because he was like, it's twisted. So you're not going to be fast in a twisted go-kart. It's just crashed.
You totaled it.
You literally can't see that it's twisted, but he's so experienced, he just knows that you can't crash something and expect it to be the same again. Mm-hmm. And when it comes true from the manufacturer, that's how you want it. You don't want a crashed go-kart. So I got a new one, and guess who got my twisted go-kart? My mom. My mom started racing. So yeah, it was that was the beginning, and
you were into it even though you crashed and nearly killed yourself out of the gate. You were into it.
I don't know if I was into it as much as I was up for it. So we would go to the track and practice. I didn't know this until much later in my life, but Wednesdays were apparently open practice day. So we'd go, and I was asking to go to these open practice days. I love the process. Another thing that I've realized that I love is I love the process. And so I loved sort of setting a goal and achieving it. I loved hearing my lap time was faster. And so when we'd practice, this would happen. And so I got better and better. I mean, I couldn't even keep up. My sister and I couldn't even keep up on the parade laps. Like when everybody's going slow, formation laps, couldn't even keep up on those laps. But halfway through the season, I started winning, and I set the track. I set the track record.
Started winning and getting the track record.
Yeah.
So you had you had some kind of natural ability for this.
Yeah, I guess.
Because there has to be some kind of natural ability, right?
He said he did see it. He did see it. Yeah, he was like, and then after that, after the first year, he just kept pushing me.
What about
Since
your
he
sister?
knew I could do it, we just kept going
Was she
further.
not into it?
So my sister, she was okay. I mean, we weren't much different, obviously, but I probably progressed a little bit more, but she got banged around a lot. I mean, she was probably 45 pounds when we started. So you have to weigh up the go-kart to a minimum weight. Oh. And her seat was absolutely bulletproof. That thing had so many sheets of metal on it to like get the cart the right weight. And she would fly down the straightaways, this little lightweight thing, but then she'd slow down too much in the corners, and people were literally driving over her. And so she just didn't like it, and she quit.
What is the natural skill set? Is it like spatial recognition? Is it like hand-eye coordination? What do you think it is that makes someone a really good driver?
I love that I'm talking about this with you, because I think that you'll be able to help me with this. So I've been talking about this a bit lately, and quite a bit. And just say it simple. I think that not a lot of people have like a killer instinct in them. And in particular, I don't think women do. So I talk about this from my standpoint as a female mostly, but I really believe like you have to have this killer instinct that when people push you around, you want to push back. So like I could be walking down the street, and it could be like dark in the middle of the night and in a bad part of town, and I'm literally walking down the street looking at people going, can we swear on this?
Yeah, you can swear on this.
Looking down the street, like, I dare you to fuck with me. I dare you. Like, I think that kind of thing. And so I really believe you need to have that level of aggression of pushing back. You also need to have incredible focus. Your ability to focus has to be super high. You have to be able to stay calm, because when you get upset and you start getting angry or yelling or getting mad or frustrated, it takes you out of the game. So sort of your mental capacity to handle a lot of things and do it with a level of calm, I honestly feel like this has to be similar to what you dealt with.
Yeah, certainly. All those things are very important because you've got to be aggressive. In fact, I talk about being default aggressive. That's got to be your default mode. Your default mode has got to be like, I'm going to make something happen. I'm going to go attack this problem. I'm going to go solve this problem. If your default mode is like, hold on, I'm going to wait and see what happens, you're going to be too late. Now, there are times when your default aggressive decision is to not do anything. Like, oh, I see what's happening, but I'm going to take a step back and wait for a second. That's okay. But you have to be proactive in your mindset. And then you absolutely have to be able to remain calm. If you're getting emotional, it's going to be a problem. So those things are really important. And then being able to, and I guess this is part of being calm, but being able to take a step back and see what's happening. Mm-hmm. And I know you played basketball too, right? Like, so you were a point guard in basketball?
Yeah.
So you're a point guard in basketball, and being able to see the floor, right? Being able to see the open players, being able to see more than just like the basket, your defender, and the ball. You're not going to be a terrible point guard. You have to be able to see everyone on the court and be able to see where the open people are. So I think those kind of things are very similar that would make you good as a driver, which I don't know what makes you good as a driver. Mm-hmm. I've done a little bit of driving. We went to a school where we learned how to.
Yeah.
We learned how to. Actually, I went to a cool school where we learned how to hotwire cars and steal them and then race them. And
Sorry,
then,
this is a school?
Yeah.
This isn't a gang?
No, it wasn't a gang. It was a school, and we learned how to hotwire cars, and then we learned how to, go fast in the cars. And we learned how to, like, do pit moves and all that. Do you know what pit stops? You call it pit moves, right? That's a common term.
Pit stops?
No, it's not a pit stop. So a pit move, I forget what it actually stands for, but it's when you hit another car in a way that causes a desired reaction.
Oh, just spin them out or something like that?
Out.
Yeah,
It's
like hit their left rear when they're
hit their
turning
left rear.
or
Yeah,
something.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
So we learned how to do that, and then we do it a bunch. And so, but it was a cool school.
Yeah.
You can't, it's really hard to steal modern cars unless you have special equipment for those cars. But like in the early 80s, late 70s, and before that, you could steal anything.
Coat hanger,
yeah,
baby.
Like you just walk up, it was so easy to steal them, and we'd get put on a timer, and they'd have a parking lot full of cars, and you'd have to like run out, select which car you wanted to steal it, and then drive at a certain time. And
what would stealing, what's the skill set for?
Oh, you're in a foreign country and you are on a foot patrol, or you're doing something very clandestine where you're wearing civilian clothes, or you're in a semi-permissive environment. So there's maybe not an open war going on, but all of a sudden you get yourself into a jam and you need to get out of there. Cool. We're going to jack a car. Let's go.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I learned a little bit about driving, just from doing that.
Sure.
We went through, some race car driver taught us like some basics about driving. But, I mean, I'm talking like completely rudimentary, so I don't want to get too crazy
It's
here.
already infinitely more than most know.
Which is weird, right?
Do you feel like you're good on the road? Did you feel like all those skills helped you to drive on the road better?
Yeah, they definitely did. Yep, they did. And I grew up in New England where it snows.
Oh, yeah.
And I grew up in New England where we have dirt roads and we have snow-covered roads, and so we do like rally race cars all the time. Yeah, we would do J-turns and all that stuff. So I was lucky to be able to do that before I came in to the military, so I had a little bit of driving skills.
Well, I have an idea for a company that I want to start.
Okay,
I want to start a driving school, but not a racing school, like a driving on the road school.
That'd be good.
Because I drive so easily on the road because I can drive on the racetrack. So I have to imagine that the curriculum for driving on the road has not changed in like 70 years, I'm sure. Yeah. So it needs to be new, and you need to be able to do more because so many people suck.
When you think about what driving is on a regular road and the dangers that it entails, it's a miracle that there's not the people. Well, I think we do have like 40,000 people killed a year.
I agree with you.
From driving.
I think to myself, I'm like one decision away from.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
You're going, and some of these people are 15, 16 years old, and yeah.
They just don't have a big enough scope. What I always tell people when they drive on the road is I'm like, just stay in your comfort zone. That's it. Mm-hmm. If you get outside of your comfort zone, you start freaking out, right? You start panicking and you make poor decisions, which is why if you do something like what you did, where you go and you learn how to spin and steal and drive fast and crash people, like you all of a sudden get a beyond normal scope of awareness of what's possible. And now driving inside of that, it's like lifting weights. Like if you lift 5-pound weights all the time, like you're never going to grab the 50. But if you grab 50, the 5 is nothing. So we need to take you to the 50 or the 100 or the 100 or the 500, whatever, weight, so that you can drive on the regular road really well. So driving school, Danica's driving school.
What do you drive right now for a vehicle?
I just got a really great car, and I never really have cared that much about cars. But I got a Lamborghini Urus, and I got, apparently people see it and they're like, oh,
the Lamborghini
wow.
SUV.
It is.
What color is it?
It's all black. It's all black. Black wheels, black interior, red seatbelts, and red brakes. Red's my favorite color. So
Did you test drive it? Was there something that made you buy that?
Well, I really was sick of my Range Rover. So I needed a new car. I had it for a long time. I had that car for like 6 years. So I was ready for a new car anyway. And I thought, what should I get? And every time I get a new car, I'm like, God, where do I go from here? You know, actually, my first car that I bought was a BMW 645. And that was because I got so many cars for free growing up, like racing. So I drove for Bobby Rahal, and he had dealerships. So I would get a car from him. And then before that, I lived in England, and I would get a car from, someone over there. And I just kind of got whatever. Mm-hmm. But when I finally could buy one, I bought a 645 BMW. I think I bought it like a convertible even. Again, red interior, black car. And then I didn't have a car for a long, long time. So the next one I bought was the Range Rover. And I was like, oh, no, sorry, I skipped it. So I bought the BMW, and then I was like, where do I go from here? And so I bought a Lamborghini, but I bought a used one. I bought a Lamborghini Gallardo, and it took a lot to go up from a BMW. Like I tested a few other. Well, like where do you go? There's no in between.
How did you like the Lamborghini?
The Gallardo was fun. It was just
when
the car.
When you're driving that, how are you not just freaking getting speeding tickets every 30 minutes?
And I did, and I did, and
especially because you're used to going 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, and I always thought to myself,
75 is like a joke.
How can I get out of these tickets? I thought to myself, maybe I should have my FIA racing license and give that to them with my driving license. Maybe that's like the subtle way of saying hello. And then I would not say this, but I've thought to myself, then I asked the cop, do you have one of these?
That would have gotten you in more trouble.
Yeah, big time. You have to be super nice. But anyway, so I had a Range, and I was like, oh, where do I go from here? And I'm like, a Lamborghini, of course. That's always stop two for Danica. So, and I got the Performante, which apparently is like a more rare one too. So it's the sportier version. So I drive that sucker around in sport mode everywhere. And it's not because regular mode isn't fast enough. It's because I hate the alarms. You know, when you drive a nice car and they have lane departure and they have closing rates, and you're like beep, 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 and then it slows your car down automatically with the brakes, and that stuff drives me nuts because I'm so outside the bounds of normal people of what they do on the road. And so I was like, I brought it back to the dealership. I'm like, turn these freaking alarms off. I didn't get a nice car so that I could not turn these things off. And they're like, yeah, it's like hardwired in there, but you could turn it to a different mode. And I was like, fine. So I'm like in this, basically rocket where it has like these levers, and I'm like, I just pull the sport lever and boom. Then I have to turn it off when I get in my neighborhood though, because it holds RPM for a long time before it shifts. So I'll be driving around in like first or second gear in my neighborhood, like wah, 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 wah. And I'm like, I sound like a jerk. So then I pull it back into regular mode, the other lever, and be PC for my neighborhood.
Very nice of you. All right. Well, you're growing up, you're in these go-karts, and you end up the World Karting Association Grand National Champion 1994, 1996, 1997. Is that right? So you're the number
Probably
one.
In multiple classes, too.
In multiple classes, meaning like different engine sizes?
Yeah, exactly. Like Yamahas and 820s and different. There's like, I'm not going to make any sense to anyone else.
So it's very clear that you have not just hard work, but you have a gift. You have to have some kind of gift to win that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Again, I had the focus, I had the discipline, and I had a tough dad. So like I had a talented father to wrench on my go-kart, to know what to do with it. Most of the time people aren't going to know how to like set the clutch, set the carburetor so it's not too lean or too rich, like make the gear, choose the right gear, change the axle. These are all things that most people just don't know. But my dad was just so smart. And so he was really technically inclined, but then also he really pushed me. And a lot of people said that, they were really afraid with my talent that it would be what holds me back from succeeding because my dad was so aggressive.
Like you might just quit.
Or like he might make me unattractive to companies and teams because he's just too much to deal with.
Did you learn how to deal with him yourself? Like, clearly you must have. Would your dad yell at you like, "What the hell were you doing on that last lap?"
100%. He would, 100%.
Do you
From the
ever
time that I was 10, and it wasn't until 2020. I remember I went back to Indiana. I was sort of dealing with some emotional stuff, and I was like trying to excavate my life and like, why am I like I am, and what's going on? And so I asked my mom about racing. Like, I don't remember a lot before I was 10, and that was when I started. And so I don't understand why, but I think it's because I blocked a bit out. But I asked about getting yelled at the track, and I said, how often would that happen? And she was like, every weekend. And I don't even remember every weekend. I just remember sometimes, I remember some fights or some times that we would, I can remember some scenes, like some flashes, like a picture. I can remember being somewhere. But she was like, every weekend. I was like, every weekend? She's like, every weekend. She's like, of all things, like that's what I regret most, that I didn't stop that. Mm-hmm. So my dad he was really tough. And, the thing that I'd say is he did always say I didn't have to do it, but if I did do it, he was going to help me do it the right way. So I've always described him as someone that's he didn't really push me, but he would pull me along, like drag me along sometimes. Yeah. Drag me through the mud.
And you must have realized that your dad cared about you, and like some of that anger and frustration from him would be, you must have made that translation in your head as a little girl, thinking, my dad's not yelling at me because he's mad at me as a person. He's mad because he wants me to do better. Do you think you were able to pull that off? That's a huge reach for a little kid.
Yeah, it gave me the programming that nothing, like I was not enough because nothing was ever enough. So I took that into my adulthood, and I took that into my relationships is what I took that into. I think it probably propelled me in work, but in intimate relationships, it was not a good thing. Yeah, because I just always would overcompensate, and I would be codependent, and I'd be like, how do I fix this? And I'll just do better, because I could always just do better. Mm-hmm. I knew how. I had such huge capacity to do better and dig deeper. And so that was where it didn't do well, but I truly believe that there's like a season for all this stuff. And I'm not mad that I was like that. It made me who I was. It helped me accomplish great things. But that season came to an end.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of dominating in this world, kart world. And then the next thing that happens is you have the opportunity to race to race in England.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is it safe to call England the Mecca of driving? I
think so. I think you could say it's definitely like the Mecca on the planet of racing would be in England. It's probably the most popular and densely populated with tracks and series and different things. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
And how does this come about? Do they recruit you, or do you
kind of
volunteer to them?
It's a little bit more of a recruit. So when I was 14, I was winning everything, and this family had noticed me because I went to this suite and turn to at the Indianapolis 500, and I was just watching at 14 years old. And I talked to this guy that was a British guy, and I was just asking, I guess, all the right questions. And then I remember him telling me something like, oh, you could learn more in 1 year in England than 5 years in America. And I'm 14. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a really smart idea. Let's do that. Anyway, 2 years go by, and I'm very successful. And so he worked for this family, and this family got in touch with my dad and said, we'd like to meet with you guys. And so we almost didn't go. It's a 4-hour drive each way from where we lived, and it was like raining all day, and it was just like a rough day. It was in Indianapolis. Okay. And we lived in Northern Illinois. And so it was a long drive, and we were going to do it all in a day. And it was like, oh, should we go? And what I ended up realizing is that, and this is true for me, basically this is true. To the best of my ability, of course, is that I just usually do the right thing in the end, even if it doesn't rely on my dad. Like, I do the right thing. And so we went, and we had this meeting, and they wanted to take me to England. They're like, we've watched you. You're amazing. We want to help you with your career. And so I went over there at the end of that year at the end of the year when I was 16, and I raced in this winter series.
Are they signing you to some kind of a contract?
Yeah,
at this point?
yeah, kind of. I'm trying to remember. There was some level of a contract. I don't know if it had started then. I think it might have. It at least started after that. So that was my junior year of high school, and I missed half of the first semester of junior year.
So you're 16 years old.
I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior. I was this first month of school. Then I left for 2 months to do this winter series. And then I came back for the last month of school until Christmas. And I ended up going back the next year for the full series. So
How'd you do in the winter series when you got over there?
I think I was okay.
And what were you racing?
It was called Formula Vauxhall. So it was a formula car like an IndyCar or an F1, but no wings. So, and of course, far less sophisticated and much less horsepower. But basically just trying to give you a visual. It's an open wheel car with no wings. And so the wings create downforce. And so it just makes the car slower. So you can't go quite as fast around the corners. So it's, a little bit of a safer speed probably for a low level. So you're learning how to drive an open wheel car, but without the full downforce yet. So the winter series was not necessarily so much just a test. It was more practice to get ready for the next season. So I did the winter series, and then I never went after Christmas break. I didn't go back to school again, and I moved over to England. And
was that your first time? Because go-karts aren't open wheel, right?
They are actually.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I know. It took me like a really long time in my career to learn this, so don't feel bad.
Oh, no. I get it, but I was trying to imagine what I was thinking, honestly, embarrassingly enough, I was thinking about like the go-karts at a carnival or whatever, when they have like the entire bumper system around the whole thing. Yeah.
No, these go-karts.
But then I always remember those little go-karts.
Yep, they have like a front bumper and a back bumper, but the tires are still like you can still climb them a little bit here and there. So. And
the open wheel more dangerous? Because if they connect, it's going to be like an immediate problem, whereas you have a little bit of a buffer if you have closed wheel? For
2 reasons. You can climb wheels, so it can have more spectacular things happen. And then, of course, you're exposed. You're open cockpit, so your head is exposed to the elements. I was hitting the head with a tire in IndyCar one time. It ricocheted off my helmet. And all I got was a rubber mark on it. I'm like... I have some serious angels.
And that you have I was watching videos of you, and you have like a full apparatus around your head.
Yeah, it's a head
clearly
surround.
You have to.
Yeah. Yep. So they've made it safer over the years because of things hitting drivers. A driver in IndyCar was killed a few years back from debris hitting him. So they created this windshield that goes on the front. In Formula One of the drivers was hit with a spring. So then they created this sort of halo, they call it, where it's not. There's an upright in the very center of the car, so it literally is dead center in the car, and then it comes around the head, right level with sort of the top of the helmet, but it's open underneath, so that's where you're looking. So that's called a halo. So they've developed a bunch of things over the years to help protect drivers' heads from the elements.
Why don't they just put a little enclosed cockpit? Why don't they close off the wheels? What's the advantage of it? Is it just because, hey, this is just cooler?
Why don't they close off the wheels? I guess it would change the aerodynamics of the car. It would turn it into a full body, which takes away from the way that the car operates aerodynamically with just the wings and the underbody. And probably it just wouldn't be true to itself anymore. It's probably a valid question, to be honest, why there isn't more done to just even like putting yourself inside of the cockpit. Well, one of the things is if you were inside the cockpit, and let's say one of the things that we had to do to start the season every year in IndyCar was we got timed how quickly we could get out of the car. If there was an emergency, we had to be able to do it in under 5 seconds. And so now imagine that you have an actual something over you latched and closed. Like now you're actually trapped. Yeah. So safety, because in a stock car, in a car where it has like a door, a window, you climb out the window. So essentially that's your top is the side.
Cool. All right. So now you get over there, you do the winter season. And how'd you think you did in the winter season?
I think I did okay. I don't remember exactly how I did. But I was okay.
But they saw potential.
Yeah, and it was also like part of getting ready for the next year. It was like a good way to get some time on track.
And at this point, at some point, you get sponsored by Ford.
Yeah. Ford does sponsor me. It came through the agents. It came through the people that took me over there.
And you end up, when you go back to England, and all this is from your book, you end up being there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, 19. It was kind of like last half of 16 to the first half of 19.
And again, coming from your book, you're doing all this mature stuff, like living over there and being a racer and all this stuff, but you were still like a 16, 17-year-old girl that's just like...
Yeah. I mean, what do you do when you're 16 years old and you have no parents and you have nobody to really like double check everything, and you're hanging out with a bunch of teenage boys because that's all there was? Like, I like partied and had fun, and I did I did a lot of what I would have done at home on some level, right? But I was on my own, and maybe I did more of it.
Well, in England,
not more than everyone else, but hey, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. In England, drinking is way more socially acceptable.
It's like in America, pastime is baseball.
Yeah.
In England, pastime is drinking. Literally, a pint at the pub is like their pastime.
Normal, everyday type scenario.
Yeah, and you didn't. I mean, shoot, you could get in anywhere. Like you didn't. Age was not like a hard thing. Drinking age was lower. Right?
Yeah. No, I think the drinking age is 16 or 17 over there.
Maybe, yeah.
My wife's a Brit.
Oh, really?
So like for her, she just grew up just drinking. When she was 13 years old, they would drink at the dinner table with their parents. And it was one of those things where when she moved to America and she saw like the way kids acted here, it was more like crazy binge drinking at a young age. Yeah. In England, they also have crazy binge drinking too. But I guess her thought was the normal exposure, like this is not that big of a deal.
Right.
But you know how kids sometimes, like their first year in college or whatever, they're going full ham on the freaking booze. Echo Charles, you seem to be nodding enthusiastically with that. Did you see that? Did you see some of that over there in Hawaii?
We saw some of that, yes.
Yeah, some people getting crazy. So that happened to you, Danica, being 16 years old. All of a sudden, there's pretty much no rules.
Pretty much no rules.
No drinking. No drinking limit age.
Yeah.
And you're just rolling in there.
And no, my parents were super strict about my curfew when I was growing up.
And then who are you living with over there?
I lived with
like a dorm?
Two different two women. One of them worked for a Formula One team, and then the other girl just like had a regular job. She was just like a regular person, but they were roommates. And then I come along. And so the first thing I do when I get to England is I'm like I'm literally sleeping on a couch. And my bag's underneath the stairs going upstairs. Like I just was all like the couch was too. And I'd pull out the couch to do the pull out bed, and that's where I'd sleep. And then eventually the lady who worked for the Formula One team would travel to London every weekend. So she was like, I'll do the couch during the week. You can have the bedroom. And when I say bedroom, it's more like a closet. It is a shoebox. Mm-hmm. It is like enough for a single bed and then like a little hanger at the end of it's so tiny. But then I moved into the bedroom after, I don't know, a month or two or something.
And are you going to school? Are you being no books?
No, I'm done now. I'm getting my GED, my good enough diploma.
When do you get your GED?
I got it when I came home that year after my first year in England. So I actually graduated before all my friends.
Okay.
Actually, it's true. That part's true. But I did fail the first time I took it. You
failed the first time you took the GED?
I did.
Because you hadn't done schoolwork in a year.
Well, I'm actually decently smart. I'm not brilliant, but I'm fine, and I have decent recall. And so I would never study. I hated studying, never studied. But I'd always do my homework. So I'd learn enough from the homework, and I was not a jerk in class. I paid attention. I wasn't disrespectful. So between paying attention in class and doing my homework, I learned enough to know. And so I was like an AB student. Like I was like a 3.5, 3.8 student. Like every year it was easy. I didn't study.
No factor.
So I passed everything except for the Constitution test. And so I don't politics and government are really not my strong suit, and I just like it just doesn't make sense in my brain. I don't know if you guys have these things like that just in life they just don't make sense. And that's one of those things that does not make sense, like the house and the this.
Well,
I don't know.
The thing is, it's not intuitive.
That's maybe what it is.
So if you didn't actually like say, okay, how is the Congress set up? What are the three? Like it doesn't. There's no.
Yeah.
You can't just kind of logically go, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I got it. You'd have to actually learn it. So if you didn't study, you wouldn't know it.
I did
So you
not.
failed your GED
So I
first time.
failed
How
the
many
GED because of that, and I only passed it. I only just passed the Constitution test in 8th grade to go to high school. I had to have a 70 to pass. A 69 was failing, and I got a 70. So then fast forward years later, I haven't studied at all, and I take the Constitution test and I fail, and I'm like, oh, they give me like a little booklet, and I only had to get 30 out of 60 right to pass. So anyway, I failed it, and I had to get this booklet to study, and I have to imagine I only just passed, but everything else was fine and easy. But
And so meanwhile, so you're in England, no school. So how many hours a day are you driving?
not. I mean, it's just like the weekends. And I remember thinking to
What?
myself,
So
I was
during
like,
the week, what are you doing?
nothing, like going to coffee shops and sitting and drinking cappuccinos. And that's when I started getting into health and fitness stuff. I would grab all the health and fitness books and I'd flip through them, and I'd just sit there and drink like 2 cappuccinos, and like, I mean, I there was nothing to do. There was really nothing to do. I'd go work out, and I don't know.
And then you go to the pub at night.
Go to the pub, go to the club, whatever,
Where were you? What?
I was in Milton Keynes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Which is like Race Central.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. It's definitely a good location.
And then on the weekends, what are you doing?
You drive to the track.
Are you learning? Is there someone coaching you? Do you have like a mentor? Are you sitting in classes? The guy like, hey, follow me on this run, or I'm gonna,
No, you're just driving. You're racing. You're learning by racing. And so I have teammates, and but they weren't really teaching me a lot about the car. It was kind of a lot more like, if you can't drive the setup of whoever's fastest, then you have to figure out how to drive the setup. Like, they weren't just going to change it. And here's the thing. Every driver has a different style. And so every driver needs a different setup. Fast forward later in life in Indy cars, like, I loved it when someone saw when I was really fast and people put my setup on, because I knew they couldn't be as fast as me with my setup, because it's mine.
So you're just getting in the. Are you still in Vauxhall, or this is switched to Ford Formula?
So this was Formula Vauxhall.
Ford.
That's right. Good. Yep. It was Formula Vauxhall, and then the next year was Formula Ford.
And again, you're just basically getting a car that's not rigged for you.
It's just a basic. It's just, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's not set up special. I mean, I have my own seat, of course, but it doesn't have it's not curated handling wise for me, really. I mean, you give feedback, but shoot, I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to change it. I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm. And then how often are you actually racing on the weekends?
Most weekends.
So I was under the impression that when you were in England, it was like, it was like this school you were going to, where
like
people,
a boot camp.
Yeah,
almost?
like a boot camp where they're like, okay, Danica, let us talk about tire pressure on cold weather days, and like that. None of that. It's just like get in the car and race.
Yep.
And it's pretty much race every weekend.
Pretty much, yeah.
And is this a series where people are watching it, or is it just like a minor league?
It's a minor league, super minor league. So there's no recruits and people coming to be like poaching, like, oh, Danica's really good, let's bring her to the bigs. It's not like that at all.
It's lower than that.
It's lower than that. It's like, can you do this? And then you go to the next. And can you do that? And then you keep going. Like, you're a few levels away from anyone actually watching to see if you should drive their top level car.
How many of these kids, are they all like younger people? They're all like 16, 17, 18, 19 years old?
Yeah.
Are they all just super rich families?
Some. Yeah, some.
How could you do this if you weren't kind of rich? I mean, I know that you weren't
Sponsors.
Rich. Oh, okay. So they all get sponsors.
Yeah, like when Ford helped, or like this family did, or like sometimes young drivers will get somebody will sponsor them. They will support them, but they do a contract where if they make it, then 20% of their salary over the next 15 years or something goes back to them. So a lot of people. Did you have that
kind of contract or no?
I did not. I got
lucky?
super lucky that I didn't have to do that, but a lot of drivers did. A lot of drivers had to kind of sell their soul a little just to get the chance. And so I don't know. I had this so I came back from England when I was 19, and it happened in a dramatic way. The team was only like 4 or 5 races into the season, and the team just wasn't giving me what I wanted. Basically what happened is the season before I was driving for a secondary team within the series, and because the main team, like the factory team, said we don't want to have 5 cars on our team, so we'll put you in this other team. We're going to give you all of our setups, the cars, it'll be the same thing, which it never is. And then, after that, then next year you can come race on the factory team. So the next year comes, I'm racing on the factory team, and guess how many cars are on the team? 5. So I'm like 5th driver on a 5-car team, and so we got about 5 races into the season, and I was told by my managers, because I was talking about that, I was like, I don't understand, and I don't feel like I'm getting what I need, and they said, just don't go to the track. And so I remember not going to the track, and thank God my sister was with me in England visiting, and so we just sat home from the track one weekend, and I was like, this is so weird, and I went home. And then I tried to find a ride back in the States, because so I left England in a dramatic way. So I came back in the middle of a season, and I'm at this point 19 years old. So now I'm not racing full time at 19. I'm not racing full time at 20. And it wasn't until the end of the year, the next year.
Do people know who you are at this point?
Not really.
Because you kind of made a name for yourself in go-karts, so people probably saw you, but then you shipped off to England.
And I'm a girl, so I people, I would say in racing had probably like kind of heard of me or like had known something about it. And I was also on some TV shows when I was young, like MTV came to my high school, and they were filming like some like extreme sports stuff, and so MTV was like put me on their show, and then there was also another one called Passion to Play, Making of a Champion, and there was 3 women featured, and it was myself, Tara Lipinski, and Anna Kournikova. We were all 14, and so they followed me around my high school and all that stuff too, and so that was like a Sunday special, and narrated by Robin Roberts, who was like the host of it, and it's so funny too, like, because I haven't seen Robin in a while, but I saw her obviously many more times in my life after that because of going on GMA and different things. So it's funny to have that one be full circle. But I was only 14, and so I'd done some things that had got some attention, and I did so well.
But then you get overseas, you're not like a superstar,
right.
So maybe people are like, oh yeah. We kind of remember her, and so you come back to America. And then you had some opportunity to do something with BMW, it sounds like, for a little bit.
That was all I did from 19 to 20. So again, the very beginning of that year when I was 19, I came home. At the end of that season, which I didn't race at all, at the end of that year, BMW asked me to come test their car for them, and it would be for a sports car ride, but you just take what you can get. And so I went, and I was faster than their main driver, and like the main driver had to go put like sticker tires, like new tires on, to go lay a lap down just so that he could go faster. Dang. And so they hired me, and then that car was made illegal the next year because of the engine was not a stock engine that they would sell, and that was part of the requirements with the series. So they just didn't race because it would have cost like $250,000 per car to make that a production car with a different engine. So we didn't race, but what it did allow me was me and my dad had the opportunity to pound the pavement. So we would go to the racetrack each weekend, and we would just see who would be willing to give me a test or a ride, or, put me in the car, see what I can do. I mean, geez, we would literally go to the bathroom for something to do. Like it was just like, it was selfless, just arduous, begging almost. And people, the best thing people would come back with is like, oh, it's some ridiculous number to just drive their car and test it. It's like, it was insulting to be honest.
What do you mean ridiculous number?
Like they would say, oh, it's like, if you want to test this car, if you want to race this car, they'd put a price tag on it that was so high.
You mean you would have to pay them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that backwards for the way you would want it?
You don't really get paid back in those days. Like at that level, you're not a paid driver, but usually they'll test someone to see if they're good, and that might not cost anything or nominal. But like when they were slapping like insulting numbers on it, if I was going to drive it, which meant they just wanted to see if they could just get some money out of me at least.
Oh, okay.
So
there's a term that you use in the book, and you're using it a little bit right now. Ride. Like trying to get a ride.
Yeah,
expand on that a little bit. Yeah.
A ride is like you're trying to get a seat on a team. You're trying to be able to have a spot in the series, with a team and a car. And so that's what a ride is.
That's what a ride is, looking for a ride.
Yeah.
Toyota Pro Celebrity Race. You go out there and...
I did. I won it, and so there was it was a fun. So the Toyota did this pro celebrity race. I don't know if they still do it or not, but did it for a long time. They'd get some really good celebrities. Like I'm trying to remember some. I remember the one that always sticks out is Bryan Cranston was in that race. I remember, but anyway, I was in the pro category, and I was also out there with another driver. And I became friends with him. His name is Tommy Kendall, and he was a really great sports car driver, and so there was actually some good competition when it came to the other pros that were in it. It would be like 15 celebrities and like 5 pros. So the pros would have to start. Actually, this is brilliant. I think in sports, tell me if you think this is a good idea. There should almost always be like a baseline normal person to show you what is really normal. Yeah. Like take the Olympics. Imagine someone's going doing downhill skiing.
Yeah.
And you had to have like a regular person
that's a really good idea.
To have a delta.
Yeah.
This is how good they are. Because people look at race car drivers and they think,
I could kind of do that.
I might be able to do that. I could drive my car. And but you have no idea. And it looks easy because you don't see the car moving, because if it moves too much, trust me, it's going to crash. So it's always moving a little bit. Anyway, so they would start the celebrities like 15, I don't remember, 30 seconds ahead, 15 seconds ahead, a good chunk ahead. And the pros would start back. And so I won. I won the pro, and I can't remember where I finished overall. I don't know if I won the whole thing or not. I might have. I don't even remember. It was 20 years ago. Yeah. But that was like one of those things where PR liked me. And so after I won, the next day I had made a bet with this guy, Tommy Kendall, that if you beat me, you can walk me down pit lane before the race tomorrow, the IndyCar race, or it was kart then, or champ car. You can walk me down pit lane with a collar and a leash.
And you did it.
And I did it. So there's these moments in my career where I wasn't necessarily I wasn't super established, but it caught some traction. And then I did some sexy photo shoots too. Those helped.
What was this when you did FHM? Mm-hmm. Was that year? You did FHM that year?
I was 19, so yeah, it might have been that year.
That was a big deal.
Yeah. I remember I got a lot of flack for that. But
wait, you got flack for it?
Oh man, especially from feminists and people that think I'm taking women, I'm lowering the value or the perception of women by doing stuff like that. But I never did anything outside my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. I really didn't. And I just have a different comfort zone than you, obviously.
Yeah. So you started getting a little bit more popular.
Yeah.
We started moving towards Danica Mania.
Yeah. We're just 2 years away from Danica Mania.
We're getting closer. Now you were talking about going into all these different races and just talking to people. And this is where you end up kind of having a pretty pivotal moment when you meet with Bobby Rahal,
That's right? Yeah. Yeah.
And how's that go down?
Again, back to my what I know about myself now is I do the right thing. So you remember when I took the meeting in Indianapolis, and I was like, we don't really want to go, but it's like, all right, we do the right thing. So my dad was like, all right, Milwaukee race weekend. We only lived an hour away. He's like, let's go to the track. And I was like, oh, Dad, I'm sick of walking around begging people and having nothing happen. I'm over it. And he was like, let's just go for 45 minutes. And I was like, all right. So we go. And I had received a phone call from someone either that week or the week before that said, hey, I could have a full-time sponsor for you, a full sponsor for the Formula Atlantic Series, which was the series below Champ Car, was the feeder series. So the minor leagues, triple A's, double A's. How does it go? And so I said, and he said I could have a full-time sponsor if there's a letter of intent that says that, Bobby will do an Atlantic team with you in it. And I was like, wow, okay. So I went to the track. We went to pretty much straight to Rahal's hospitality. I saw Bobby, and I told him this. And I was like, I've also realized I'm very direct. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I walk right up to him, and I'm like, hey. And I was like, so I talked to this guy, and he said we could have a full-time sponsor if you put me in an Atlantic car. And he looked at me, and he went, okay.
Done.
Go home. Celebrate. it truly happened. 2 weeks later was the next race, the next Champ Car race, and they were racing at Laguna Seca in California, up north, and and we signed a letter of intent at a press conference with everybody there, with the media, that Bobby was going to start an Atlantic team and I was going to drive for him.
That's it.
And I found out much later on, this is just years ago, that I found out, like, everyone told him he was crazy. Everyone told him, like, I can't believe you're doing this. And I said to him, obviously later in life now, and I was like, I'm so glad that you looked smart. Like, you know, when somebody's questioning you and you feel convinced that it's a good idea or the right thing to do, and you just, like, hope to God you look smart in the end, I'm like, I just really was glad that I made him look smart.
How hard is it to go from different types of cars to different types of cars?
You know, luckily I was able to do it, but it's somewhere, for a lot of people, you can get lost in it. Sometimes it just doesn't translate. Like, you watch people in sports go from college football to like NFL, and sometimes it just doesn't translate, right? They can be the number 1 draft pick and then they are a flop. Like, sometimes it just doesn't translate.
Yeah,
and
I was shooting, and I used a certain type of pistol my whole life, and because that's what we used in the SEAL teams. They don't use it anymore, but I used a 6-hour my whole life, and whatever platform from a 6-hour, and I was going through a course, and I was using a different platform, and it definitely took some like getting used to. Like, I wasn't close to as good as I would have been with a SIG.
Accuracy and everything.
You know, it was more like the mechanics of moving, because once you're on the trigger and you're looking at the sight picture, it's pretty, that's pretty much, I know how to do that well. But just the way the other mechanics of the pistol are just a little bit different. And so you'll be like reaching for something and it's not there. Anyways, I could imagine when you're in these different cars that there's some people that it's going to be really difficult to go from this one to that one because it's just different. Yeah.
Could be downforce and how it works. It could be how the brakes work. It could be like how the car, like how to be able to decipher what the car is doing to feel it accurately, to translate that back to an engineer so you can make changes to make the car better. Like, maybe you just don't feel it really well. Yeah, maybe. And also, I think a really big layer of this is your mind. I think a lot of people, as they progress, they just don't have they just aren't strong enough
to make the changes,
to stay confident, to not get overwhelmed, to not take themselves out of the game, to I just think you have to have like a really, really focused mindset, and you have to just have you have to have enough confidence to dig deeper.
I guess too, the fact that you raced different types of cars growing up, you weren't always in the same car, so you already got used to making those adaptations in your life.
Yeah.
Maybe that helps.
And maybe I was just good.
Hell yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. I've never actually said that out loud like that before, but I just thought of it and I was like, maybe I was just good.
Well,
and you know, my dad has tried to tell me this over the years too, but because I mean, when I look at myself, if I'm looking really objectively and honestly, was I good? Obviously, I was good enough to do what I did. You don't stick around and you don't race for 27 years because, you know, you're just a girl. Like, trust me, there have been plenty that there would be a lot more girls if it was about just being a girl. Was I the best ever? No. But was I good? Yeah. And so, like, why was I able to go from one to the next and be able to do it? It's like, I guess I was just good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had talent. That's what I was saying. When you're winning, like even as a little kid, you're winning like these national champions. Like you have to have some level of natural talent.
Yeah.
And I've seen throughout my life, there's people that are good at stuff.
Yeah.
There's like people that are just good at stuff, and maybe they're good at this thing, but not good at something else. And you're really lucky if you can find something that you were good at. Like you might have also been able to be a great guitarist or a great whatever other kind of athlete. But thankfully, you found something that you were just naturally talented in, that you're good at.
Do you think that someone, when they're good at something, because I mean, you're going to have to agree with me on this one. You can do so many things well, like you, because you're such a perfect example. You've been good at so many things. And so I'm like, for me, it's a curiosity of like, what is it that makes someone so able to plug and play themselves into so many different things? And like, you can't just say you're just lucky. Yeah, you're able to, you have a skill set or a mentality. There's a skill set and a mentality that makes you a plug and play person.
There is, but people have natural talents. And the best example I can give, because it's very, very clear, is fighting. So there's people that are good at grappling. They're naturally good at grappling, meaning wrestling, meaning jiu-jitsu. There's people that are naturally good at that. There's people that are naturally good at striking, meaning punching, kicking, elbowing. There's people that are naturally good at that. There's people that are naturally incredible grapplers that they are not good strikers. And they can't really make that transition. And there's people that are naturally good strikers and they don't make that transition. So even though they're maybe even world class in some cases at grappling or world class at striking, and sometimes this is such a good example too, because sometimes people, they've trained almost just as much in, let's say they started off as a striker, and then by the time they're 13, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to wrestle, but they never get as good as they are for that natural gift that they have of striking. And they never, or same thing the other direction. So there's people that can be really good at basketball, but they're not quite going to be as good at baseball, right? Now look, could we look at Michael Jordan and be like, well, you know, Michael, he tried to play baseball and obviously he would, but he had dedicated his whole life to basketball. So maybe you could take Michael Jordan and say, hey, Michael Jordan, go back in time, now just focus on baseball. Would he have been? He probably would have been hella good at baseball. But there are other people that they could be really good at one thing, but it doesn't necessarily translate to everything that they do. So I bet if we got to look at your freaking like blueprint, like God's blueprint for you, he probably have like 7 things. He'd be like, oh, look, she could be really good with these talents. She could be a really good race car driver, really good, well, you're small, like really good jockey, really good gymnast. Really, like there's probably 7 things that you could have totally excelled at. And then there's a bunch of things that you wouldn't have excelled at.
Oh, trust me, there are things that I am so bad at. And the skill, I mean, details, being sweet and like demure and like and indirect with people. Like there's some, or like I don't know, I don't even know how to say it correctly. Like. There are things that I am just not very good at. So this isn't me trying to say like, oh, if you're good at one thing, you know, if you're a talented person. But I think that you can plug and play your talents that make you good at one thing and into other things. Now, when we're talking about just racing itself and like how are you able to transition from the levels and continue to achieve at the next level, I think you just have to have a lot of raw natural talent. You also have to have incredible timing. You have to be with the right team at the right time so that you can look good. So I also think that I had a luck on my side. I had fate on my side. I had, you know, I put myself in the arena a lot, yes, but I also had to be with the right person at the right time too and not get stuck in a car that sucked and made me look like I sucked, right? Because there's only so much a driver can do.
Yeah. The other thing that, well, when I was going through your history and reading your books, is like sometimes you would win first place or you'd win pole or you'd have the best like track times or lap times during the warm-ups. So you definitely had the requisite skill to win. You definitely had it. And then, you know, like you said, you got to get lucky. Maybe you run out of fuel. Maybe you get hit. Like, there's a million little things that are going to happen. And there's a different game, right? There's a different game when you're alone on the track and you can go wherever you want than when you're jockeying with a bunch of other people. And that's a little bit of a different game. And I'm sure there's people, like we have people in mixed martial arts that in training, they're annihilators. And they get in the night of the event and they don't do as well as everyone thinks they're going to do. Literally, we would have guys that would... You know, guy A wins in training every single time. Guy B loses to that same guy in training every single time. They go into and fight, you know, other people. And the person that usually wins in training loses, and the person that usually loses in training wins because someone rises to the occasion. Someone gets intimidated or they get nervous or they get hesitant or whatever. So there's so many things that are coming into play. And how much of racing is like just mental. Yeah,
so much mental. So much mental. I'd say like my arc of the weekend was usually like, you know, yes, I could be fast in practice, sometimes not. I would say my strength was the race. I'd say that like, qualifying was my weakness. My biggest weakness is probably qualifying. Like first practice, I just was not one of those drivers that blitzed it. Like I wasn't one of those that just like went way past. I'm much more methodical about it. So I'd say like first practice and qualifying were not my strong suit, but the rest I was good. And so the race always got better for me. But the mental side is so important. Like just keeping your head in the game. When I was younger, I used to get so angry inside the car. Like I could come on the radio and I would just say every swear word I could think of for us, like mad at someone in front of me. And then it was kind of pointed out and I realized that I'm probably not helping myself on track actually, because I'm taking my mind so out of the game that I'm not passing him as quickly as I could. And also just realizing it ends up being my damn responsibility. Like I can complain all I want, but I'm just making up excuses really. It's my job. Even if they make it harder on me than someone else, it's still my reality. You still have to deal with it. So once I realized that, I was like, I just need to shut my mouth and get by him as quick as possible because that's my best bet to making this go as well.
Did someone tell you this or was that a self-realization?
I think somebody kind of had mentioned, like, you know, you take yourself out of the game when you are mad like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, okay, that makes some sense. Yeah.
How old were you when you started realizing that you should not get so mad?
Probably in the middle of my IndyCar days. So I would say like late 20s. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of stuff we got to learn. It's so crazy, isn't it?
I mean, and what's crazy too is how much you learn after it's all over with, right? Because it's so hard to take it all in. It's so hard to we can't see ourselves clearly. Yeah. So it takes a lot of time and growth and other people and experiences and patterns to be able to show us who we are. Yeah. When we're in it, we're in it. We're so distracted that we're not able to really be very philosophical about ourselves. We're like deeper into understanding ourselves from on the mental side of things or why we do things. So it takes time.
Yeah. And what's hard for you is it's all recorded history.
Oh yeah.
Like everything that you did when you were freaking 22 years old out on the track. It's like, oh, you can go watch that on YouTube right now.
Yeah. But thank God there wasn't phones doing what they do now.
That's true.
England would have been a lot worse. I see every now and again, I'll see a photo. Somebody's like, oh, look at this picture. And I'm thinking like, do we have the bulbs that flashed and broke? Is it that old? Like, and I'm looking, oh, dude, do I look drunk in that photo? Or it'd be like 4 people at a club. And I'm like, oh, geez.
Yep. Thankfully, there was no cell phones back then.
Well, there was in England. It was actually cell phone time. There wasn't in America, but
there wasn't cameras on the cell phones.
Totally, exactly right. And we still had to use you still had to go through the letters on each number. Oh, yeah. We didn't have like a full keyboard, so it was a bit of effort.
All right, so now you're in the Toyota Atlantic Series. You get the first podium by a woman in Monterey. We go into the 2004 season. First woman to win pole position at Portland International. You finished second in that race. So you're old Rahal made a good bet.
He did, and I finished third in the championship my second year. And I remember. So it was a 2-year contract with the third year being an option for the team for me to go race IndyCar. And my attorney did a great job negotiating this contract. My sweet Jack, I love him. I still actually just talked to him a couple of months ago.
Is he still your attorney?
No, he's not. But he did this deal, and it was 2 years. And the third year being the option, it was for $500,000. If Bobby wanted me to go to IndyCar, I was going to get paid $500,000 to go race IndyCars, which is a great deal.
You're right?
Stoked. Yeah. And so obviously you want him to re-up, right? So it's the beginning of the second year of Atlantics, and I'm standing in the pagoda in the media room at the Indianapolis 500. It's that weekend, and it's Thursday, which is media day. So Bobby and his drivers are up doing their media availability in front of everybody, and I'm just watching. And somebody asked him about me, and he said that I was going to race in the Indy 500 the next year. Dang. And nobody knew, and he just dropped. This was May too, the season just started. We have the whole rest of the way to go. So now I know all of a sudden that I'm going to race in the Indy 500 the next year. He's picking up the third year option year of my contract. I'm going to get paid $500,000. Dang. And I go race IndyCars the next year.
Pumped.
Yeah.
And now this becomes what, the Rahal Letterman?
Yeah.
Is that when it becomes that?
Yep.
So David Letterman's into freaking racing.
Yeah, he's from Indiana.
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, he grew up there, and he grew up going to the track, and
And so he's super hyped on it. And you roll into this. I think your first race, you crashed your first race.
Big one. That was when that was a really big crash. There was an accident in 1 and 2. It was about 3/4 of the way through the race, and there was a car sliding down the track, and I was going underneath the car, and I didn't make it by in time, and it clipped the right rear of my car and shot it, nose turning to the right, shot it up into the wall, hit not head on, but at a pretty steep angle, and slid down the track. Ended up, it was kind of on fire. Slid onto the grass. The medical team came over. The truck's there, and I get out of the car, and I'm like stumbling, and I'm so out of it. I turn the opposite direction of the ambulance, which tells me I'm really out of it. Mm-hmm. I get in the ambulance. I don't remember any of this. I get to the medical center. I don't remember any of this. I wake up on a table, and I open my eyes, and I see a bright light above me, like this one.
Oh, and you thought you were dead.
I thought I was dead.
Damn.
I had no idea where I was, and I was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And my mom was there, and then a priest comes over the other side. I think I'm dead. The only next thing I could remember thinking, other than like, am I dead? My mom was like, "It's okay, honey. You just had a little accident." I'm like, "Accident? I'm dead, Mom." So, and then the next thing I remember thinking is, I hope they don't take my suit off, because I didn't wear underwear. Like, I just wore my suit because, not trying to like have provocative information, but my hips would be, the belts are so tight that I'm not heavy enough to have a lot of like fabric, like a lot of skin and fat. So my hips needed no wrinkles. So underwear and things like that would like wrinkle under there. So I just limited all things that could wrinkle and like have a seam on my hip bone. Have you guys ever gone skiing? You know when there's just like one little thing that's on your shin or on your ankle, and by the end of the day, it's a giant problem? It was like that in the car. So I didn't wear underwear ever. And so I was like, I hope they don't take my suit off, because I don't have any underwear on. And then I got yelled at because I didn't have the right earpieces in. And I'm thinking, this all seems like a lot right now. I don't feel like you should be yelling at me for not having my accelerometer earpieces in when I, am like dead. But anyway, so I got rushed to the hospital in the ambulance. I'm in the ambulance on the way, and I apparently kept asking the nurses the same question over and over again, because they said, "Honey, you've asked that question 3 times already." And I just couldn't remember, right? So I just kept asking, did it look bad? I'm like, was it spectacular? And so I get there, and, we do the MRI and scan and everything. And at that point in time, I was married, and he was a physical therapist. So he knew all the like technical lingo to get me out. And so I didn't have to stay overnight, and left and flew home. And I had a race 2 weeks later at Phoenix. So I sat on the couch with ice packs all over me, because I had a lot of bruises. I also did some electrical sort of like, it's like lights and noises to reprogram my brain. So I did this for like 2 weeks, and then I raced at Phoenix, which was a hard race, and I sucked, and I did terrible, but I was cleared to race.
Yeah, you had a massive concussion.
Yeah.
Like today's concussion protocol, they'd probably not let you. Oh, I don't know if they do that in car racing.
No, they did. We still had you still had to go I still had to go take the test.
Okay.
So since I had 2 weeks, I went and took it the week of the race, and it's the same protocol as they do now. It's like the dots and the lines and the numbers and it's all the whole memory cognitive thing. It's the concussion protocol test.
Check. And then you sucked in Phoenix.
I sucked in Phoenix,
but you end up 4th in Indy, Japan, the Japan 300,
which was only another few weeks after that. So that 1 was Homestead, 2 was Phoenix. I don't remember what 3 was. I think there was maybe 1 more, and then it was Motegi, which is the Japan race. And I qualified on the front row on my when I went, and I finished 4th at Motegi. And then the next race was the Indy 500.
Mm-hmm. And the Indy 500, you're rolling into this. Like what I was talking about earlier. You like had you had the fastest practice speed.
Yeah, I won practice a lot. It did pay.
Yeah. So people are freaking hyped. I mean, people are thinking like, if you're the fastest practice speed.
Yeah, and in qualifying, I was fastest on Fast Friday leading into qualifying. Oh, no, that was before the race. I was actually fastest on that day.
How old are you at this point?
23.
What's the normal age of a driver?
I mean, that's young.
Normal?
I mean, that's a young normal age.
Okay.
That's a young normal age to start. Yep. And I went into qualifying. It was a really cold day, and I was so nervous. And I kind of, similar to like the last race in IndyCar that I did, I felt like I was just gonna have to, I was like, no matter what, I'm not gonna lift. And by lifting, it means come off the throttle. So I thought, as soon as I go out, I am not coming off the throttle. I am going to, once I start my lap and you had to do 4 timed laps, and they take your average. So I was like, I'm not going to lift. So I went into turn 1. It's a really cold day and the track's cold, and I didn't lift until I had to lift or I would have crashed. So I got completely sideways, caught it, which is actually the best thing I could have done, because if I'd have just qualified on the pole, everyone just said you had a fast car and a fast engine, like you just qualified on the pole. But I actually showed some skill, and I caught the car at 225 or 35 miles an hour. And then I finished that qualifying, and I never lifted after that, and I qualified 4th.
Damn. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about the fuel like strategy in like the Indianapolis 500. So what's going on with that?
So many stops that Indy 500 is where there's the most amount of sort of different strategies that play out. So, you have to pit like every, 30 or so laps. And
that's for tires and fuel?
Fuel, mostly.
Mostly fuel.
Yeah. So, so like at the end of the race, I had 50 lap tires on, but that's because I had already done a bunch of laps. And then I came in under a yellow because I had spun and had to go to the back. I came in under a yellow. We topped off, and then I never came in again. So I had 50 lap tires at the end of the race. But I was running out of fuel as well because we were stretching it. So, I inherited the lead through a pit stop cycle because, again, like I said, I topped off on a caution, and then I never came in again. So everyone else came in, tires, fuel, everything, and I took the lead, and I led for a long time, and then came in. Then there was a caution, and somebody had gotten by me, and so I was starting second on this restart, and there's not that many laps left. And I remember coming on the radio, I'm like, everybody say a prayer. And they're like, we've been saying them all day. My sweet Ray, my engineer. And so green flag came out. I timed it perfectly and got a great run. And I passed Dan into turn 1 and took the lead again. And there's a really great clip. It's my favorite clip on YouTube. It's like 30 or 40 seconds long. And it's of me taking the lead, but it's from the stands, and it's from a fan. And so it's like obviously low quality res, and but what it shows you is what the fans were doing. And after that race, everybody asked me, they're like, well, not everybody, but many people asked me, could you hear the fans cheering when you took the lead? I'm like, no, I could not. Not with all of my friends with their 800 horsepower or whatever we had back then, driving 240 miles an hour. But it was a big moment, and so it was a really cool clip, and it gives me goosebumps every single time I watch it. And so I took the lead again. I led for a while, but then I pulled away, and but then we had to save fuel, and we didn't really have the same fuel monitoring system that I had moving forward after that, which is sort of a sensor that was needed to see exactly how much fuel I had. Anyway, so I was detuning myself. So there was fuel mixtures. So you can, full rich is like full fuel. That's full power. And then you can detune yourself by taking fuel away from the engine, which takes power away. So I was like, fuel slot 1, that's the most, full bore, pulling away. Fuel slot 2, pulling away. Fuel slot 3, pulling away. Fuel slot 4, maintaining. Fuel slot 5, maybe not maintaining as much. Fuel slot 6 and 7, that 8 was a caution map. That would cut cylinders under caution. Okay. So it would be like you'd never run fuel slot 8, but 6 and 7 was I was now getting caught. And so I got passed, and they were kind of just telling me like, just finish the race. The only thing, I mean, I wouldn't change my life for anything. I love the whole way that it's all gone, and I'm totally a believer in like the butterfly effect and sliding doors. One thing leads to a change in everything. But I mean, in hindsight, I could have just said, screw it, and I'd have run whatever fuel slot it took for me to just maintain so they wouldn't catch me, and just rolled the dice. And I would have made it to the end on fuel.
That's what.
Yeah.
You did a post-mortem and you're like, you have this much.
I guess I had
left.
like 2.5 gallons still left, which was 2.5 laps.
Jack. So you end up getting 4th place.
I got 4th.
Which is still enough to cause kind of initiate.
Oh yeah.
Some
yeah.
mania.
So that's when Danica Mania started, and I remember before the race, I was told they were like, "Hey, if you win, you're going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated." I'm like, "Okay." And so the race got over with, and they're going to want a photo shoot. They're going to want to take a picture. Like they're going to want something. I'm like, whatever. I won't care if that happens. And so the race got over with, and my publicist was like, they still want to do a photo shoot. They don't know if we're going to run it for the cover, but they still want to do a photo shoot. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like exhausted. And so I remember I poured a giant solo cup of red wine, went to this location where this photographer had a setup, and it was on the way to dinner. And I was there for about 15 minutes and did this photo shoot, and then went to dinner to get absolutely hammered and celebrate the night. And then they said the next day, they're running it as a cover. And then they took that cover, and the next race was Texas Motor Speedway, which is the guy that ran it is a huge promoter. And so he made a huge billboard of me of this cover, and would proceed along the years to be a very big promoter, meaning at one point, I think the next year, Dan Weldon and I had a fight at Milwaukee before we went to it. And so we literally were painted on a billboard looking like fighters. Yeah, like fighters. So anyway, so I have this huge billboard now at Texas, the next race. And there was a lot of people that got pissed off along the way. There was some autograph sessions every single weekend we had to do, and they would separate it by driver, right? So it's just you get in line for whatever driver you wanted. And so my line was so long, and there'd be nobody else in any other line. So at one point in time, the drivers from the team that I ended up driving for next, the Andretti team, they all vetoed the autograph session. They sat out. They're like, we're not doing it because you have all separate lines and you should have one line, and nobody comes, and doesn't seem fair. And so
you made people angry.
Yeah, I did. I mean, yes, they, at the end of the day, people's reaction to you says a lot more about them than it does about you.
Sure does.
Always does. And so really what that's saying is that, they were feeling insecure. They were mad that they didn't get the attention for things that they did, or they're like, what could I have done to, that says a lot more about them than doesn't mean I didn't do anything, but yeah, they got pissed off.
What's the equivalent? Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
What's the equivalent today to cover of Sports Illustrated? Because back in the day, look, internet wasn't quite as what the internet is now.
Yep.
So if you were a cover of Sports Illustrated, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's the equivalent right now?
I don't think there's an equivalent.
There really isn't one.
Yeah, because it's all fractioned of, fractured or whatever. Yeah, Sports Illustrated, that was the hub.
Yeah, you had the unified attention of the world.
Yeah.
There's no way you could get that much unified attention of the world right now. Maybe if you were... Well, you couldn't.
When you think about it, actually, really, Sports Illustrated in the sports world, because you got the sports world, then you got this is way smaller, but Black Belt Magazine or something, you have your certain hubs for. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was way more mainstream for sure. Yeah, yeah. So now it's kind of the same deal, but now instead of 3 or 4 or 5 hubs for each activity or whatever, there's 150.
That's an interesting thing to think about is what's an equivalent to that. And
for a younger listener right now that doesn't remember Sports Illustrated and what Sports Illustrated was and how huge it was, it's a huge deal.
Oh yeah.
And so you end up 12th in the overall standings, but you're rookie of the year. Rookie of the year for the Indy 500, Rookie of the year for the IndyCar Series. There's a documentary called Girl Racer that comes out. You start your first of your famous GoDaddy ads. So all that's happening. You're female athlete of the year. You go on freaking tour. You're on The Late Show. You're on The Today Show. You're on Jimmy Kimmel, Good Morning America, CNN, every talk show in America. So it's on.
Yeah. Yeah, it got real busy. Back when I was in England, racing only on the weekends, I remember thinking to myself, how does anyone make a full-time job out of being a race car driver? And then I found out.
When you're in between races, now that with this, I keep visioning, people like you breaking down with your car and like, how much time do you spend driving when you're not racing now that you're a pro? Is it all the time, all day, every day?
No. It's expensive. So there were a lot of actual rules got put in place to help the teams out with budgets. So we didn't have that many test days. There'd be like a certain amount of test days that you could do in a year, and it might be like 4.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, this is weird. In my mind, I thought you drove that car freaking every day.
Oh, no.
All day.
So you'd really pretty much just do the weekends. So, but there'd be practice on the weekend. So you get there and they might have 2 practices on Friday, practice on Saturday morning, then you might qualify, and then the next day you race. Right. So there's like I can't remember. Every series has a different flow, and sometimes they'd change it from year to year. But basically, you'd end up having a lot of times like 3 practices, a qualifying, and a race. So you'd get 3 to 4 hours of practice, and then qualifying, and then the race.
Oh, damn.
So it's actually like a half day of practice. You get kind of like a half day of practice, because when you go test at a track, you'd practice from 9 to 12 and then 1 to 5.
How about video game simulator type things? You ever tried those things?
Oh, I hated them.
Did other people use them?
Not back then, but now they do. And now, like especially in Formula One, I do a lot of stuff for Formula One now with hosting or with analyst stuff. And F1 drivers do a lot of simulation work. Like they're in the simulator, and it's like super real, and they wear the helmet.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of it in NASCAR, but we didn't do any of that in IndyCar. And so, no. But I learned a trick really young when I was in go-karting and of visualization, and no one told me. Like, I don't know how I don't even know why I had the idea, but I knew that a way to practice was to close my eyes, and it wasn't like I just like whiz my way around. I would discipline myself to but I would do it perfect. I didn't have to be like a accurate lap time in my mind's eye of the lap, but I just had to make sure that I was driving the lap and I would hit every corner just perfectly. So I would practice a perfect lap. And I did this a lot of times before I went out for qualifying and then before the race, just like visualizing a perfect lap. But that's, obviously you're not doing that many of those laps.
All right. So now you're signed for another one with Ray Hall, Letterman.
Yep.
You end up doing the 24 hours of Daytona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I did. Yeah.
And that's with a few different drivers.
Usually do 4 drivers total.
And you're going 24 hours. See how far you can go.
Yeah. So I think that first year, I feel like I was like with Rusty Wallace and I don't remember who else. There was a couple of really good drivers. And we were pretty fast, but it was because the season was so short in IndyCar at that point. I think we only had maybe 14 races in the season. It was our shortest season we'd ever had. And man, maybe we didn't even start till like April or something. So I think I was doing that because it was like my dad was like, help me out. Like probably should get some more seat time instead of sitting out of the car for 6 months.
Check.
Yeah.
And then Toyota Indy 300. This is where Paul Dana got killed. Day of the race.
Yeah, beginning of 2006. Yeah, exactly. My second year in IndyCar. He died in the morning, and then we didn't race that day. It was there was a crash, and he came around and didn't see it in time and hit it head on, and he died. And they were getting a hold of his wife. His wife was in church. She was pregnant. He didn't know. Or maybe I don't know. I feel like for some reason my mind said he didn't know, but she was pregnant, and she was like in church on Sunday when this happened. And so we sat out that race, but that was the first time. That was not the first time I had actually been at the track when someone died, though. When I was in England, there was someone that died at the track. He crashed and hit an Armco barrier, and how it has like gaps in it, the Armco. There's like maybe 2 or 3 levels of the Armco, and he hit the Armco and died immediately.
And when's your next race after that?
Probably within the next week or 2. We race like either every week or every other week.
Any sort of hesitation?
So what was interesting is that we didn't race that day, and I basically was like felt bad for my family and loved ones around me because knowing that that's a potential for me, I was totally ready to go out there, and I kind of had this feeling of like I feel like I don't know what this says about me, but I feel bad for you guys that I don't worry. That's not as concerning enough for me to go like, I need a minute. I was like, I would have gone out there.
Yeah. The weird thing is too, I was just hunting.
You probably can associate with that.
Well, definitely can associate with losing friends. But I was out hunting, and I was hunting for whitetail in Iowa. Mm-hmm. And you're waiting. And is it a little bit boring? I guess. Yeah, it's a little bit boring. Like you're sitting in a tree stand or you're sitting in a blind. And then all of a sudden, it's just like, buck comes in and it's over in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like it just all happens so fast. But what I noticed, I watched a bunch of your races. I watched a bunch of these crashes. Is everything's just normal. I'm not saying it's boring, but it's normal. And then in a split second, it's just like someone's dead. Like so fast, it just happens. And it could literally happen at any moment in that entire race from the first lap until the very last lap.
You could do it by yourself. Something could break on your car and you could hit the wall and you just hit at a weird angle and something happens and you die. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's exactly right. So when you're in the car and you have a vibration and it's getting worse and you're radioing in, let's say you're in the race and you're like, got a vibration, it's getting worse. They're like, okay, we don't see anything on our end because they're getting live data streaming from the car. They're like, let us know if it gets any worse. And it's like, oh my God, like you feel like your life's in your hands of like, how much do I compromise whether or not I feel like I should be careful versus screw it? Because you don't know what screw it means. What if a wheel falls off?
And that stuff happens.
And it happens. Yeah. I literally drove down the front straightaway at Kentucky one time testing, and I felt this weird feeling, and I jumped out of the throttle. And I'm going 200. If we're on an oval, Kentucky was an oval, you're going over 200 every time. And I lift out of the throttle, and as soon as I lift off, like this thing, and it spins around, and the right rear literally fell off the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check. All right. You end up 6th. And look, there's so much stuff that you've done. I was trying to tell you this before the podcast. Like, you've done so much stuff in your life and so much stuff in racing. It was kind of hard to capture all. But you end up 6th at Grand Prix at St. Petersburg, 8th in Japan 300, 10th at the Indy 500. You end up 9th in the final standings. This is 2006, and then you switch to Andretti Green. Why'd you make that switch? Well, offer comes up. This big negotiations.
We weren't as fast the second year. Like I just, I felt like I needed a new opportunity. Obviously at that point in time, negotiating everything from like the best team. The most important thing was driving for the best team you possibly could, but also money, salary, sponsors. So I just felt like it was a better opportunity somewhere else.
And Andretti, obviously there's a big name there. When you say the best team, is that the people that are working in the pit? Is that the people that are designing the cars, or what is it?
That is what it's made up of. But usually when I say best team, it just means they're the fastest. They have a good combination, like the engine manufacturer that they're running, the chassis, like they have good engineers and they have good pit crews and they have a great reputation, and year in, year out, they're really strong.
2007 seasons, like 8th at St. Petersburg, 7th in Kansas, 8th at the Indy 500, 8th at the Foyt 225. This is where you get in a fight with Dan Weldon.
Oh yeah. I remember every year. It's so funny you're saying this. This is such a dumb story, but I remember going in to get facials because I've been getting facials for like 20 years. And my friend Shannon, and she'd be like, "How'd you do this weekend?" And I was like, 8th. She's like, "I'm sick of you finishing 8th. Can you finish something different than 8th?" I'm still friends with Shannon. But so we were pretty fast actually, but yeah, things kept happening. So this race at Milwaukee was an exciting one. And I've realized that part of what makes me remember a weekend is not necessarily how I start, but how I start and then finished in the delta. So this was one of those weekends that was a huge delta. I started off, I was slow in practice, and then we just like Hail Married a whole different setup for the race, qualified in the back. And I had passed all the way. I was passing Dan Weldon for 5th place in the first stint. So the stint just means how long you're running those tires. So this is in the first like 80 laps of the race, and the race is hundreds of laps long. So I haven't even pitted yet, and I'm already passing for 5th. And I go into turn 1, and I go underneath them, and he comes down, and he just chops me and hits my tires, and it bounces me into the grass on the inside. Now, we're not going 200 because this is a short track. It's a mile. But I mean, what are we doing? 150, 180? And so I about lose it, and I come back out, and I am so mad. And so I end up finishing 5th in the end. I go all the way back to last when this happens, and end up finishing 5th. And after the race, you don't normally see drivers. Like you think, oh, we're with everybody all weekend, but shoot, you get in, you go to your team, you get in your car and you don't see drivers. So Dan's literally like right behind me on pit lane when he stops his car. And so I just go over to him and I grab him by the neck and I'm like putting my hand around his shoulder like I'm like hanging out, buddy. But I am grabbing his trap so freaking hard that if you look at a picture, you can see it. And you can see him like cringing as he's walking. And so I asked him, like, I was obviously pissed off and I was asking him what he was doing and I was yelling at him. And then, so that was, these are all things that just like propelled the mania and propelled the popularity and the curiosity. I get it. Like to some degree, I don't like myself for all the things that I've done, but they were just all part of growing up and they were part of my decisions and they were honest and authentic, right? Like we were talking about before we started about this authenticity thing. I've said forever that I totally understand that not everyone's going to like me. It's not possible to be yourself and have everybody like you, but at least they can respect your authenticity. So if I was being interviewed, I mean, when I went to NASCAR, GoDaddy sent me to media training because I never would say their name. Like I didn't say my sponsors because I'd answer the question. I wouldn't be like, oh, how can I like fit all my sponsors in and give some bullshit answer about like the guys back at the shop? I would answer the question. So I was always really honest and authentic. And so I was really mad and everybody knew about it.
Is that being mad? How much of that being mad is like you could get killed? And how much of that being mad is like, I could have won this freaking race.
I could have won this race, totally, yeah. Because actually, I remember when I'd like pray before I went out on the track, and I would actually feel like I was catching a little loophole by asking to do really well, because most people would be like, let's be safe. And yes, I wanted to be protected, but I asked to do really well because I was like, because if I do really well, I didn't crash. Like I felt like I was asking in a loophole. Felt a little selfish, but I was like, look, asking you shall receive, right?
Apparently you had some kind of a meeting with the president of Indy to reconcile with Dan after this incident.
Oh, I'm sure we were totally called to like the penalty box. I've been called to the penalty box many times. The other time I was called to the penalty box was because I was leaving Loudon Loudon, New Hampshire at the racetrack, and they weren't letting all the golf carts out after the race. And I was like, we're on a golf cart. Our cars are parked outside. We're trying to hurry up and get to our car that's parked there and waiting and staged for us so we can drive to the airport and hurry up and fly home. And so I was like, well, give me your radio. And so I got on the main radio and I was like, why are they not letting? And so Mike Helton in NASCAR, that was another like penalty box weekend where I was like, he's like, you can't ever do that again. I'm like, oh, shoot.
You end up second in Detroit. You end up 7th overall in that season, 2007. 2008, 10th in St. Petersburg. Indy, Japan, 300. You end up winning.
Finally. Yeah, and that's exactly how it felt. Like there was opportunities along the way in the years previous, and all the way tracking back to my 4th or 5th race in IndyCar at the Indy 500, and it just felt like it just took a long time, and so it felt like such a relief. Yeah, it was a big relief, and
first woman to win a top level sanctioned open wheel car racing event.
Yeah.
Ever.
Really, any racing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not great on history and stats, but I'm gonna say any because none have ever won in NASCAR, none have ever won in F1, and I'm gonna say in any racing.
How much hype was there when you won that race?
Any top level, I should clarify that, not any racing because girls have won.
Yeah.
How much? What
was it? Crazy? Did you get the cover of Sports Illustrated again?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It went. I did, yeah. And the cover this time said, "Yes, she can."
Oh,
I can't remember actually what the first cover said. I was trying to remember. I just remember it was all red, and I signed over A-Rod's head every single time I autographed because of the positioning of where I was on the thing, and I kept remembering thinking he'd probably get mad at that. But I got on the cover of Sports Illustrated again. We shot that before the race weekend because it was going into the Indy 500, and yeah, it was a busy time. We flew straight, took the helicopter from the track to the airport. Drank a whole bottle of sake, like a giant bottle of sake with my mom and dad were there, thankfully. And Haley, who's been with me since then, she's my VP, my manager, my assistant, my name it, one of my best friends. But we all flew to Long Beach, California. And the last ever Champ Car race was that weekend. It was it was done after that, and they were merging with us as the IndyCar series. So I went to that and I landed and slept for about 2 or 3 hours and woke up at 3 a.m. for hair and makeup to be on all the morning shows on the East Coast. And it was a bit media tour.
Just hype it all up.
Yeah.
4th at Kansas Speedway. Then the Indy 500 comes around again, and you have a collision in the pit.
Oh my God, that was the only other than my very last one. That was I was running 6th, and Ryan Briscoe came out of his pit box and he just went straight to the wall, which just means there's a wall separating the track and the pit lane. And so there's only so much room. And so he came out of his pit box and they just sent him. And you're supposed to make sure you're clear all the way out. You go lane by lane. And he just went all the way out and he hit my left rear and it broke the suspension. And I pulled off to the side. And then they wheeled me back all the way back to my pit box. I was so mad. It was the last pit stop of the race. I was running 6th, and I got out of my car, and you could find footage of this very easily. And I got out of my car, and I didn't give a shit what anyone said. I just got out, and I started walking down pit lane with my helmet on, stomping my way down to Ryan Briscoe's pit stall because he was in his pit box. And all I kept thinking is, if I can't go back out, you can't go back out. And so I was like, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know if I'm going to jump on his front wing and break it or take his steering wheel or what the hell I'm going to do, but he's not getting back out. And so I make it like 3/4 of the way down there, and I can actually hear the crowd now because they can see what I'm doing. For all I know, I'm on the Jumbotron. I don't know. And I'm not thinking about any of this stuff, though. Like, when people ask about feeling like the crowd or hearing or thinking about things, I actually don't feel like anyone's watching once I'm out there because there's so much to watch. I don't think they're watching me. And so this very large security guard who is in charge of all of security for IndyCar, Charles, came in front of me and he stopped and stood there in front of me. And I'm like, I'm looking up and he's like, and he points his finger back, like, get over the pit wall. And I was like, okay. And I went over. And in the meantime, Roger Penske is on Ryan Briscoe's radio and he's on the radio going, Ryan, put your visor down. What? He's put your visor down because I was heading down pit lane and just didn't want him to he's like, just put your visor down. So anyway, but I got sent back over and then I had to walk my way back to my pit stall. And so I was super angry. Again, one of those things that, like, it's not I created drama outside of just like the actual on track stuff because I'm just different. Like, I get really angry and I'm not afraid to show it. And it's just part of my personality.
Yeah, it's really wild that you can go watch. Like, I watched so many clips of you, and
really?
my YouTube algorithm right now is just overflowing.
By the way, you're on a high algorithm with mine too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Freaking NASCAR and Indy racing and all these little clips of you. So, like, I was watching because I read about it. And I was like, I would read what happened, and then I'd be like, what does that look like? And I was like, wait, is this story like? What's the spin on this? You know what I mean? You think, what's the spin on this? And like, what does it really look like? And so you go watch it, and you can watch it in slow motion, and you can watch like analysts and like all these different things. So all these little crashes and stuff, I've watched them all, probably from 9 different angles.
Oh man,
and
there's a lot of them.
To watch you, yes, you are walking back to the pit with like full freaking anger,
full energy,
100%. It's so funny to watch. Funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
that's just one. I mean, I've kicked. I remember one time I got so mad I ran out of fuel at the end of a race in Michigan, and I was coming back, and I like threw my helmet, and then I got back to the pit, and I kicked what I thought was a full water barrel thing, and it was empty, and I knocked it over, and I literally ran forward and picked it up and put it up because it stood it back up because I was like, oops, that's not what I meant to do. I just wanted to kick a tire.
Oh, check. You end up 2008, 6th in the final rankings. You're still just going media crazy. You're on American Chopper, by the way, right? All kinds of different stuff. 2009 season, in the off season, you do another 24 hours of Daytona. You guys had some kind of issue. You didn't finish that. I think the car got jacked up.
I think so, overheating or something.
Yeah. 4th at Long Beach, 5th in Kansas, 3rd at the Indy 500.
Yeah. Had a shot to win that one, a really good one. That was probably my most legitimate speed, should have won. I mean, the first one was good, but there was some strategy involved. This one was an authentic, like, you're running third, you could have won the race. There was a really long caution late in the race, and one of my teammates crashed, and they had to fix the safer barrier. And it took 14 laps of caution to do that. And so I was good on fuel, but everyone else started to get gooder and gooder and gooder.
Oh, because they're all topping off.
Because they were under caution.
Oh, so they're running
slow.
So
instead of having to run full speed, they're running slow.
They're in level 8.
Yep, and we're all and while they might have had to pit with 10 laps to go, maybe 5 laps to go. Now they don't have to pit. So I was good on fuel and would have won. So I run third, and I'm like all over. I think it was Castroneves' ass forever, and I just I could not get by him, and I ended up third. And I came into the pits afterwards, and I remember getting out of the car and looking at my engineers, and they were like, And I thought, I didn't know this scenario, by the way. They didn't tell me, like, those guys in front of you, like, you would have won. I don't know anything about that. Like, I'm just doing the best I can with what I have. And so I find that out after I come in, and they're like, you really should have won the race, because everyone else should have run out of fuel and you shouldn't have, but that caution was so long. And they were so bummed, because, like, we had planned it perfect, and we were third. So it was like we were running really well, and we were totally the winning strategy. And so they were really bummed, and then I found out why. Because I thought afterwards, I did good. I did third, like, good, right?
What are the unwritten rules for, like, you're trying to pass someone that's kind of blocking you?
Well, in IndyCars, because it's open wheel, there's not much you can do. I mean, you try and trick them a little. You can, like, fake them out a little bit here and there. But there's the only thing I'd say is on ovals where there's multiple lanes. When you're running in front of someone, there was just kind of an unwritten rule that you weren't supposed to, like, let's say I'm running the bottom lane and someone else is running the middle lane. If someone came down in the middle of the corner and came in front of me, like, that's pretty shit, because it takes so much aerodynamics off of your car that what's going to happen is that the front is going to stop turning, and then you're going to catch the next lane, and then you're going to have wheel in it, which means you're turned, and then it's going to catch, and then it's going to snap, because the back is going to react to the amount of steering you have into it once you hit clean air. So a lot of times it end up in this, like, really big, like, slide snap moment. And so that was kind of the only real unwritten rule that you were kind of not really supposed to do.
So as you're behind this guy, you're trying to fake him, but there's really just not much you can do.
I'm just trying to get the perfect run. I'm trying to time it so perfectly, because the car is aerodynamically, you can't just, like, run really close, and then you have to have a run, and that run has to come down the straightaway, but you have to be close enough in the corner, which is hard when you need downforce, to get a run, actually. Otherwise, you just get close to them. So you need a run where you're, like, half the distance that you normally are, but you time it just perfectly that you come off the corner and you finish it off halfway down the straightaway, and then you pull out and you get by them. Yeah, so you just have to have enough speed, and you have to time it right.
And the cars are all, like, their top speed is, what's the difference between the top speed? If you're running a really fast car, a really slow car, what's the difference between that? Like a mile an hour?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to blow by anybody.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, when we're talking about percentage-wise, at 240 miles an hour, it's not much.
Check. You end up 5th in the overall standings that year. That's 2009. You have the most viewed Super Bowl ad in 2009, which was for GoDaddy. It was the enhancement ad where they had a bunch of girls that had enhancements, Echo Charles.
Yes.
And then you had an enhancement on your website. So that was the joke.
So many of those fun commercials over the years.
GoDaddy made a bunch of classic commercials with you. 2010, 7th in St. Petersburg, 6th at Indy 500, 2nd at the Texas Motor Speedway, 10th in the overall rankings. And this is when you start a little bit of stock car activity.
Yeah, so I was kind of curious, and there was more and more road course races on the IndyCar schedule than there was. Like, we had started with 3, and then it went to 5, and then it was like 7 and 8, and I really loved oval racing, and so I liked road courses, but I was becoming increasingly unhappy with where I was team wise, and there was, more behind the scenes business stuff with sponsorship and money and all that stuff that was frustrating. And so I was like, well, maybe NASCAR.
Are you pulling in like awesome money from like GoDaddy? Is GoDaddy your car sponsor, or are they your sponsor?
They are the car sponsor. So at that point in time, it's going through the team. So what had happened was, actually, I can tell this story. I was put on a 5-year gag order after it happened, so I've never told this story out loud, but I'll tell it. Why not? And so I'm driving for Andretti, and I have a profit sharing contract where I get over $9 million. I got 40% of whatever came on the car. So we were able to do math because some of the sponsors I helped bring over, which I paid for in the front end too. When I was driving for Ray Hall, those sponsors, there was a couple of sponsors that came with me, and one of them was Argent, another one was maybe One America. I can't remember exactly the other one, Meyer. And so I didn't get paid at the end of that contract. So I didn't make my second year in IndyCar. I didn't finish getting paid that year. And I had to also pay additional because those sponsors left and they said it was a breach of contract because I told them where to go. And there's a lot of rules on like that kind of stuff of what you can say and not say. So I mean, hundreds of thousands, $300,000 or $400,000, which was like half of my earnings in 2006 went back to the team. I didn't get it. But half of it was they didn't pay me, and the other half I had to pay them to like get out of this scenario. So I've already helped the team that I'm going to Andretti with these sponsors by paying this problem off, and settling. And so then we get into a profit sharing deal, and I mean, I have Argent, I have GoDaddy, I have One America, Meyer. Like I have really great sponsors. And we also know that the minimum amount that anyone can be on the car for is $500,000. And so, this car has way over $9 million on it. Like I think the primary was $7 million. So like, there's a ton of money on the car. And so it comes time to get paid, and we were supposed to get, paperwork on that. Like we should see what's coming in, and we never got any. We just get paid, and I got paid more than the base salary, but only based on like a nominal amount. And I was always like, that's bullshit. This doesn't feel like it makes sense. And so after a couple years, and we don't get any official documents that are qualify for anything. One point we got a 1-pager, and by 1-pager I literally mean it said like the company, how much they paid, how much went to me, and how much went to the team. Like it was bullshit. It wasn't documents. This wasn't contracts. I have no idea what the actual numbers were. And so I went into mediation and then arbitration. So while I was still driving for them, I mean, I was suing them essentially for 1.5 years.
Damn.
And so I had like I had $750,000 of legal fees that I had racked up in 1.5 years. We went to arbitration, and I mean, one of the sponsors, Argent, literally wrote a letter that said the only reason why we went to this team was Danica Patrick. The only reason. And they didn't even award me that money. They stood on the sand and said like, oh, well, they came because, Daria Franchitti was married to Ashley Judd, and they thought that was cool. And it was like, they just lied and said a bunch of bullshit. But then ultimately one of the guys, the attorney for them, said, why should she get all that money? And when he said that line, I knew that was the truth. They did not think I should get all that money. And so the settlement was something called splitting the baby, which is, I guess, in legal terms. And so I was awarded $1 million. And I didn't lose money, but I didn't really win. And so I mean, I was suing for honestly like 20, because I mean, there was millions of dollars every year they didn't pay me, millions. And so we were also going in on like treble damages, and like, we went in really hard, but we were awarded $1 million. I've never told this story before. And no one knows these numbers either. I'm telling you honest numbers too.
And when you got that $1 million, you also had, even though I
paid $750,000, I wanted to also get legal fees back too. That was part of what I was suing for as well. And so they literally like never provided documents. Like went in, and like my attorneys went into their office, and they like barely provided anything. And so anyway, that was the last day that the attorney for that team worked. He was done after that, and I saw that coming. And so that was the end of that. That was the end of that. And so I wasn't really happy. Like they weren't paying me. It was like the racing was shifting, and I was like, screw this. I just don't want to be here anymore. And there wasn't really much where to go. Andretti was one of the best teams. And there was Penske, which is really good, but I wasn't going to get a seat on Penske. And, Ganassi was a good team, but, they don't pay their drivers, and they've got some bad reputation here and there. So I'm like, I don't know. And they had a full stall too. So I wasn't going to drive for Andretti either. So where was I going to go? So I'm like, screw it. I'll go race NASCAR.
Boom.
So I did.
And how'd you like that when you showed up there?
Well, I actually loved it. When I drove the car for the first time, I had a blast. Like, I was like, I'm home. Yeehaw. I remember, oh my God, it's funny because it includes 10-4. But there was two things that were said in this first test day with this. I mean, I love my crew chief. He was such a nice guy, and he was so nice, and he was helping me out. And at one point in time, he was saying, when you come off that corner there and you get in that y'all, it's that's right where you want it. And I was like, they say y'all for everything. But he was saying yaw. And then I remember after the test, he had sent me a text message and it said 104. And I was like, what does 104 mean? 10-4.
10-4. That was a wild thing, listening to how much...
Tony Uri Jr. was his name. He's such a great guy.
How much you rely on that. Who's the person that's like coaching you as you're driving? That's like telling you like, go down, go up, come on.
No one.
There's no one doing that. I hear like radio calls. I heard radio calls, people talking to you, telling you
the spotter will give you some feedback. They might say, okay, so they're not telling you exactly what to do. They're telling you where other cars are around you. So if you're out there running, they'll say like, you got, the 8 car is 5 car lengths back, 3 car lengths back, looking inside, clear. Like they'll go through what someone else is doing. They're not necessarily telling you. They will sometimes say, hey, you're pulling everybody off of 2, but you're losing a lot out of 4. They can see that stuff, and they'll give you some feedback, but they're not necessarily telling you what to do. They might say, hey, the track is, the line's changing. Everybody's moving up. They're the high line's coming in, something like that.
And then what about the engineer who's like, hey, this monitor's going up, or you're saying back, hey, I'm getting vibrations over here. What's that relationship like?
They're the ones that you tell for the handling. So, I'll say like, it's a really pointy on turn in, the center's fine and just a little tight off or something like that. And they'll think, okay, what can I do? Can I like maybe a little left or a spring or a little left or air pressure? And they'll make the change. They won't check with me necessarily. They'll just make changes on the car for me. So sometimes they can suggest things in the cockpit. In IndyCar, there was a lot more to work with. We had shock adjusters, track bar adjusters, brake bias. We had various different things we could adjust on, but in NASCAR, it was very minimal. It really didn't have a lot of things that we could adjust. So they would do that on a pit stop. So they would change springs, tire pressure, and things like that on a pit stop.
And you must have to obviously have a great relationship with these people that you're talking to, so they can kind of like, each other, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that it's like, oh, when Danica says this, I need to do this for her. Oh,
sure.
Yeah.
Just like you learn people. You learn people. You learn... I'm at this new gym for the last few months, and one of the things they ask in the gym is like, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, like how hard was that? 1 being it's super easy, obviously 10 the hardest. And so everybody has a different read. So mine is like, 7, but like, like the is my answer, right? And then I give kind of a number, I'll be like, I don't know, 6, like how many more could you do? I don't know, 10, I mean, like there's numbers, right. But there's more my body language, my voice, my reaction. So you learn people, right? Like I could not give a number to my trainer now and he would know what it meant. And so you really learn each other. And it's the same thing with relationships, with coworkers, and with engineer and driver. You learn each other and you learn what the reactions mean. And when I say the car is tight, or I say the car is understeer, they're different languages in different sports in IndyCar and NASCAR. But if the car is not turning, they know the way that I say it, probably how bad it is, So we still use number systems, but you really learn each other, yeah.
So you kick off this stock car thing, Sam's Town 300, the Ford 300. You end up 43rd overall after only 13 starts, which is like...
Oh yeah, because I didn't run the full series.
Yeah. You end up doing some acting this year where you are you're in CSI New York, and it's a real stretch of a role because you play a race car driver that's suspected of murder.
I love it. Everywhere I went, like I'd go on to like talk shows, and they'd be like, "We're going to do a go-kart race around the set," and I was like,
"Cool,
okay."
You did your own voice on Simpsons and South Park, so again, there's still a lot of mania going on.
Actually, the Simpsons I recorded it in Iowa. I remember I was racing in Iowa at Iowa Speedway, and we had to go into some sound studio in Des Moines or something, and I recorded for the Simpsons, but the South Park one just came out.
Okay.
They never tell you either. But they came out at a very similar time. So I knew about the Simpsons and I recorded for that one, but the South Park one just happens.
Do you watch South Park at all?
I like it. I've seen a bunch of episodes. I'm not like one of those. I'm not turning it on at night when there's nothing else on, but I've totally watched tons of episodes.
Those guys are freaking brilliant.
They are brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah, and they get away with murder. They get away with
it's unreal, right?
It's amazing.
What do you think about like The Simpsons too? Like, I feel like if anyone dips into conspiracy theories at all, you'll see that there's so many clips of like The Simpsons told the future.
Yeah,
isn't that
Simpsons
creepy and interesting?
2000 and whatever, they're talking about stuff. You're like, yo.
I mean, it's weird, isn't it? It's like an interdimensional show that's like not running a timeline, that we're not a linear timeline or something.
Yeah. But you're still, now 2011, you're still doing Indy. 12th in St. Petersburg. You had a couple collisions, but you still came in 12th. 5th in Milwaukee. This is when, we already talked about this earlier, but this is when Dan Weldon got killed at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
The last one of the season.
Yeah, just
that
freaking nightmare.
You know, there was a big bounty on the race. The promoter, Randy Bernard, was running it at that point in time. He was a PBR guy. He would run PBR, and so he came over to run IndyCar. Super nice guy, but a promoter. Mm-hmm. And he had taken out a big insurance claim on whoever, and it was for Dan to win the race. And I think it was like he started in the very back, and if he won like $5 million or something like that. And actually, Dan was going to take my seat and drive the GoDaddy car at Andretti. Mm-hmm. So, no, hang on. Sorry. Yeah. He was coming back. He had run for Ganassi, and then he went to a different team, John Barnes' team, and then he was coming back, and he was going to drive the GoDaddy car. And so there was a lot on the line, like for him to go win the race. I mean, $5 million is a lot of money.
What does that mean, a bounty on him?
I don't know. That's how they described it. Or not a bounty, but it would have been I feel like they used that word, but there was an insurance policy taken out. Mm-hmm. Sorry, bounty probably is the wrong. For some reason, I feel like I remember that word for some reason.
So the insurance policy is
so the insurance
for him
policy
to win?
Yeah, it's because the insurance money that they paid to get this. So basically, if he won, it was $5 million. And instead of paying the $5 million, this insurance company they used, and so he just had to pay like a fee. So I don't remember what it was, $800,000, and that was enough. So basically, it was an $800,000 promotion. So if they won, the insurance paid the $5 million. So IndyCar didn't end up having to pay the $5 million. It would have been this sort of someone that was hedging their bets that it wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So they took the $800,000 or whatever it ended up being to get this paid if he did win. So anyways, there's a lot on the line, and it's lap 11, and chaos breaks out. And honestly, there was just so many drivers that were not oval respectful. They were like Europeans and different people, like drivers that just didn't get it and didn't have the right amount of respect and were just doing a lot of stupid things.
And stupid things is what? Cutting into people's wind?
Yeah, totally. Cutting them off airwise, chopping, swerving. Like, swerving is so dumb. Like, honestly, you're running an open wheel car, and it's just not smart. So climb wheels pretty easily.
Explain swerving.
So swerving. So like, if there's a car next to you and you like swerve into them.
Just literally swerving into them.
That's so dumb.
What do you get out of it?
There was some thought about like a little bit of like the wind next to the car would kind of help you. And that's more of a stock car thing aerodynamically. But I think also just to intimidate.
Mm-hmm. Check. Well, as you mentioned earlier, you guys kind of that race got abandoned because there was such a bad accident.
Yeah, Dan died.
Yeah, Dan died.
Yep.
And you end up that season 10th overall. But now you're into NASCAR.
Now I'm gone.
Yep. 15th at Daytona, 12th in Phoenix, 10th at the Subway Jalapeno Open. You end up 26 overall, and then it's full on 2012. It's full on NASCAR.
2012 full on NASCAR. Yep. I mean, in 2010 and 11, I did 10. I was legally allowed to do one NASCAR race a month, as long as it wasn't in conflict with my IndyCar schedule. So we didn't race every weekend in IndyCar, and NASCAR basically raced every weekend. So every month I could race all the way up until the IndyCar season started. And then once IndyCar season was over, I could race all the races in NASCAR. But in the season, I could only do one a month. So I raced a ton. I raced basically every week. I did 30 races, I think.
And again, that seems crazy going from car to car to car to car, right?
Yeah.
That seems crazy.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
Seems like you would mess something up. Are all the controls the same?
No, not at all. I mean, I went from paddle shifting to an H pattern.
That's wild.
Rolled back the clocks a few decades.
Luckily, you're so good.
Well,
that it was just no factor.
And I think too, sometimes it's like, when you jump into a certain situation that you've been in before, you have like a constellation of muscle memory for that environment, right? You have like all the systems already in place. It was harder when I did full-time NASCAR. Like in 2012, I was racing full-time nationwide, which was the series below, and I did 10 cup races to prepare me for the 2013 season, where I did full-time cup. And so it was harder to go from the cup car to the nationwide car because they were so similar than it was to go from an Indy car to a stock car.
Better to have something that's radically different.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not getting confused on the little things. It seemed like to me, when I looked at your history of 2012, Daytona 500 crash, hit a wall at Eldora Speedway, Bristol Motor Speedway crash, Hollywood Casino 400 crash. Seemed like a rough introduction to NASCAR.
Dude, it was a little bit. And some of it was my fault. Some of it was not my fault. I mean, I feel like at Auto Club, I remember I got absolutely taken out. I know there's footage of this. The car, I was driving down the back straightaway, and I was on the inside, and the car on the right of me just literally turned my right rear, just hooked me. Just literally crashed me. Like, there's just not much you can do about that.
There's how much of that happens because they're pissed at you or you're pissed at someone else?
There's a lot in NASCAR. It's kind of like, it's got a very good old boy feel. Like, they're like, you're not coming in here. Even if you're a guy, like, there are some F1 drivers or IndyCar drivers or stock or even sports car racers that are like road course experts, let's say, and they'll come in and like the rest of the field will be like, oh no, you're not. Oh no, you're not.
Happening.
No, you're not. And so they're not just going to let you come in and just rain all over their parade.
Right. Because
so now I'm a girl too.
Right.
And look, I didn't like being, and I'm coming from Indy. I'm an IndyCar driver. I'm a girl. I'm like coming in, and I have all the media attention. Oh. And they just like, I'm just a triple hate girl. Like, triple hate, not triple threat, triple hate.
So then 2013.
I don't blame them, to be honest. Can you? I can't. I didn't like being beat by a girl. I didn't like to, I can't really blame them. Mm-hmm. It's all right. Well, everything is there's such a balance with everything.
I can fully understand someone comes in from a different category, like in jiu-jitsu. Like when a wrestler goes against a jiu-jitsu guy, all the jiu-jitsu guys are like want that wrestler to lose. But when that wrestler goes against a boxer, all the grapplers, including the jiu-jitsu people, are all together wanting, that person to beat the striker. So I can see where if you're coming in from IndyCar and they're like, oh, these yuppie IndyCar
wine
snobs.
And cheese people.
Right.
Yeah.
And
actually, I was just doing an appearance for a company, and he asked me to describe all the different series, and I was like, IndyCar was wine IndyCar is like wine and cheese. Right. It's sophisticated, but it's nice, and you truly did have wine and cheese at night sometimes. Like there'd be like a chef, like one of the cooks would be making something. There'd be like a little wine party, and then go to NASCAR, and it was like beer and guns, 100%. And just like good old boys and hanging out, and they're the ones that are going shooting guns at the end of the night after drinking, not at the racetrack, but I'm just like sort of just painting you a picture, but they're wild and crazy and fun, and they're much more relaxed, and then you go to F1, and F1 is like champagne and caviar.
Oh, it's just
and there
level.
Literally is champagne and caviar and lobster. And my friend went to the Austin race and she did the whole big like $15,000 a ticket for the Paddock Club, and she was entertaining some important guests, and so there's 4 of them, and she's like, you roll up, and they literally have Ferrari champagne pouring you as you walk in, and there's lobster and everything you could want. And so Formula One is very, very champagne and caviar, and so it's very, very, very be perfect, and like, the hospitalities have Michelin star chefs, and if you get your glass of wine, you better believe that sucker's in like a fancy Riedel glass. You're not getting a solo cup.
Is this reflected in how much it costs to run the teams?
For show.
Yeah. Like F1.
Although I will say NASCAR's expensive because there's so many races, and because they could drive so much. They could probably get it because it was so popular for a while, but F1 is uber expensive. It costs $200 million to run a car or a team.
To run a team.
Yeah, $200 million. The budget is $143 million, but that's not the budget. That's just like there's certain line items that they can audit and keep within that budget. But then of course there's loopholes always. Like, how can we allocate this to in a different way that is outside of the budget? And just whoever does the best job of that. Because as my dad taught me when I was young, speed costs money. How fast do you want to go?
That's what it boils down to.
I mean, it's the same. I mean, it would be the same thing I would imagine for like equipment, whether you're talking about knives or guns or trucks or helicopters.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the best stuff is better.
Yep. And
it's more expensive.
That's the way it works.
Yeah.
Check. So you went from wine and cheese
to beer and guns.
Beer and guns.
Yeah.
Yo.
It was fun too. It was really fun.
So 2013, that's your first like full time doing the full sprint series.
Yep.
First woman to clinch pole position
at the Daytona 500. Yep.
So again, to me, that when I would read that, I'd be like, oh, like you had what it takes, like you could win this stuff.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, there was some, and that one was a little different. Like, just being super honest, that's not a hard track to drive. But you still have to do the race, and the race is hard. It's weird. Like, it's actually harder in the straightaways than in the corners because the car's a little lighter, and you're packed up in a huge pack of cars, and so there's a lot of movement and floating around and sort of like jockeying for position and like setting things up for the long run, and meaning like long term, meaning how am I going to make my way up there, or like how do I chess match this? So and there's just a lot. You're really, really tight with all the other cars, so it's constantly on edge.
You led for 5 laps there in that race. You got at 8th place, which is the highest placing for a woman in history, and you're one of only 14 drivers to lead both in Indy and Daytona laps. You led laps for both those.
That's my favorite stat. The Indy 500, Daytona 500 leading, because it's a genderless stat, and there's not many. And there's been a bunch that have done both.
Yeah, 14.
Yeah,
that's not really a bunch.
Well,
I mean, considering all
only
the
14 that led both. So
that's
in 100
cool.
years. So, I guess how old is NASCAR? 50 some years.
Yeah, something like that. But it seemed like after the Daytona 500, again, it's kind of a rough season after that.
Oh, yeah. Dude, my first year in Cup. Oh, my God. The Daytona 500 was definitely started off really well with the pole. I was 3rd going into the last lap, and so I thought maybe I could win, too. I was like, all right, how am I going to set this up? And then Dale Jr. pulls out, and everybody goes with him because everybody loves Dale Jr. It's all on super speedways. It's what's behind you that's more important than what's in front of you. So in IndyCar, you wanted to catch a toe. You wanted to catch, that's what you call it. And so what's in front of you matters. What's behind you doesn't matter. But in stock cars, you need people behind you to push you. What's in front of you matters a little bit, but there's no wings in stock cars. So it's not really as important. You need people behind you pushing you with like their air and energy, like their inertia of power will it like pushes the air actually. So it's you want people behind you. That's what creates a lot of speed. And so when someone like me pulls out, my first full-time year in Cup, and I don't have any friends.
The wine and cheese girl.
Are you kidding me? Wine and cheese girl. Danica is going to win the first Daytona 500 and the first season she races full-time. No, ma'am. And so Dale Jr. pulls out, and everybody's like, let's go.
Damn.
So anyway, I finished 8th.
Cold-blooded. Kind of cold-blooded. 2014, you're with the Stewart. I forgot to mention this. You're with Stewart Haas Racing now. Daytona 500 crash that year. 22nd.
Easy to crash at Daytona and Talladega.
Oh my God, it certainly seems like it. 6th at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Finished 28th overall in points. How many drivers are there total?
43.
Okay, so now you're 28th overall in points. 2015, get 21st at the Daytona 500, 7th at the STP 500, 9th at Food City 500. You get fined. I enjoyed this. You get fined $50,000 and penalized 25 points for what's called intentional retaliatory crash.
So this was a very exciting weekend where it was like later in the year, and it was during the chase, and this one driver, he's a total ass.
The chase is when you got like people that are gonna make it to
so basically,
win the series type
there's
thing.
So many races in the season that they had to create some excitement for the fans and some reason to watch at some point and a reset. So they started doing stages during the race where there'd be a caution and a semi-checkered flag of like results. So the top 10 would get points based on the top 10 would get points. And then it'd be a caution and a restart and from where you were. And then as the season went on, the last 10 races of the season is called the chase for the cup. And so the top 16 in points would make it into the chase. And so each weekend there would be 4 eliminated until there was only 4 left at the last race. And then whoever beats who wins. So it's very Super Bowl like, where it's like the last game is the only thing that matters. The last race, of course, you had to get there, so it's not totally like that. But you had to beat everybody else in the chase. So even if you finished 20th in the race at the last race, but everyone in the other 3 in the top 4 of the championship were behind you, you still won. So anyway, so the chase came along, and so it was during a chase race, and Logano has pissed off so many people, including me. He is like, I remember running like 10th at Charlotte Motor Speedway, having a good race, and it's like halfway through the race, and he just freaking dumps me. He just crashes me going into turn 3, and I absolutely went over to his bus after it was all over with, and I laid the F into him. And I'd probably cash some checks my ass couldn't. I cashed some.
You wrote some checks.
My ass couldn't cash. Yep. Thank you. And that would be like, I am going to make sure that you don't win this championship, and I will take you out. And like, I was terrible at taking people out. I would take myself out, which is where the story's going. And so I didn't have a lot of practice in open wheel cars. It's been since go-karting since I worked on that. And so this driver crashed me, and I hit the wall, and I came back out, and I was laps down, and I tried to crash him. I also crashed myself again and him a little bit. But this was it was not for position. So that was what I got penalized for. But then also the big reason is because it was Matt Kenseth had been taken out by Joey Logano the week before, and he was leading, and he was going to make it through the next round of the chase, but he got taken out, and Joey didn't even need to win; he just did it. And so the next week at Martinsville, he goes out there, and something happens to Kenseth, and he's like now a lap down, and so he goes out there, and the green flag is coming out, and Logano's in the top 3 somewhere, and he starts the race, and Kenseth absolutely annihilates him, and he completely in the wall, like they're both done, and so Kenseth took Logano out, but it wasn't for position. And so this was like a very, very aggressive retaliation at the very front of the grid for very big points for moving through in the chase. And so NASCAR felt like they had to do something. And so since I crashed someone for not a position based on the fact that something so much more dramatic happened, like my incident was like nothing. Like that was we were for nothing points and nothing positions. But at the front of the grid, Matt and Joey, and so they had like $100,000 fine. I don't remember, it was a $70,000 fine or whatever, 60 or whatever in points. But anyway, so I got a huge penalty. I remember getting that call and being told what my penalty was, and I was really sad about it. I'm like, this sucks. And I had probation, then I was on probation.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I watched it. It looked very intentional.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I was like, she's definitely making that happen.
Yeah.
You finished that year, 2015, 24th overall in points. 2016, Daytona 500 crashed, didn't finish. Auto Club 400, you crashed. You also got a $20,000 fine for gesturing at the other driver.
I'm sure I called someone number one. I believe that was probably when, I bet that was when Casey Kane dumped me on the front straightaway, maybe.
And you were
and I almost flipped. Like you're going really fast at Auto Club Speedway. It's a 2-mile track, so you're going probably 220. And he came down the front straightaway and came onto my right side door and got so close that he turned me in the middle of the straightaway. And it's not even straight. It's actually at a bit of it's a slight turn. I call it a dog leg. And so it's a very long sweeping dog leg. And so it turned me up into the wall, boom, hit. And yeah, so I'm sure. I mean, yeah, it was either that or there was another time where I flipped someone off for sure, though. I definitely, like, it was at Bristol, I think somebody took me out. And then I went up to the track and I gave him the finger.
You were not happy.
I gave him the number one. We've all done it.
Talladega, you crashed. 11th at Charlotte. This year, 2016, you finished 24th overall in points. 2017, 4th at Advanced Auto Parts Exhibition Race. 33rd in Daytona, you crashed, but you got 33rd, 10th at Dover, 28th overall that year. And 2017, you announced that you're planning to retire from full-time racing.
I did at the very last race. So the whole season went by, and what happened in 17 was that I had this new sponsor starting in 16. I don't even want to give them credit because then they get attention, and they literally just pulled out the next year, and it was before the second year started, and it was a 3-year contract. And that was some bullshit reason, and they said, and it really didn't make sense, and it didn't have to do with me. It was something about like something that other sponsors on the car. Anyway, it was just they just didn't want to do it, and it was a lot of money. It was like, I don't know, they were paying $30 million a year, or 20 or 30, and so yeah, so I didn't know what was going to happen when the season started. Like, were they going to tell me I couldn't race? What was going to happen? But I had more races sold on my car for the next season because I still had other sponsors. They did most of the races, but not all of them. So I had a bunch of other races still sold for that year and the next year because this is like a 3-year chunk contract. And so the plan is set. And then other cars on the team there was other cars on the team that didn't have as many races sold for the current year we were in, let alone the next year. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, I go race, and some other sponsors step up a little bit, and then they announced late in the season that I'm not going to come back to the team. And I just had to go through this process of like, what do I want to do? What do I really want? And at first, when this happened, I got this like inertia of like, I don't want to be done. I'm not ready. Like, holy crap, I was not ready for this. And then as the year went on, I just kind of started falling out of love with the atmosphere and what it took. And it was just so grueling and cutthroat. And you just had to be such a dick to be to do what you needed to do, whether that was on track or off track, even with just politicking. And it was just, and I felt like, man, no matter what I did, I just didn't feel like I was getting what I needed, and even lobbying didn't help. And I just didn't love the team manager for the team I was driving for. I just don't like him, and I don't think he liked me, and I don't think he believed in me. Like the first year I was in Cup, I never got a new car. I had a full budget. I have paid for other cars in my teams for my whole career. And
that's
I never
you attract massive sponsorships.
Exactly. And so I didn't get any new cars the first year I drove because apparently word was like, oh, well, you'll just crash them anyway. And so then I finally get a new car the second year at like, I don't know, 10 races in or something like that. And we go to Kansas. And somebody is a total dick to me. And so I go to try and take him out, and I take myself out with my first new car. And I don't like that. I know that I'm probably like justifying this idea, but... But I got an...
How much does a NASCAR cost?
I don't know.
Like when you trash with that car?
I don't know. Hundreds of thousands, I'm sure. Yeah. 100,000? I don't know. And
it has to be more than 100,000.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, I can buy a regular car for 100,000. So.
Yeah, check. All right, so you trash it.
So
you're never getting new cars.
Well, I get one. I can't remember exactly the order again, but I'm not sure if it was the very first one. The second one I got, but anyway, I go to this track, and I finally get a new car, and I go, and I end up finishing 7th, I qualify in the top 10. I pass Tony Stewart and Dale Jr. in 3 and 4 in the same end of the, and I take 3rd place at one point in the race. And like, I'm like, I wish these guys would have given me some more new cars. And so there was a whole big thing with my crew chief, and I didn't think he was putting in the effort. And as the season went on, he seemed to be trying harder. And I was like, look, I'm happy. But in the end, they took him away from me, and they gave me a worse crew chief, and one that another driver didn't want. And so he just was never on my side. And I just didn't like him. I think he was a chauvinist. I think he was just a good old boy chauvinist that just didn't like me personally. And so it made my life at that team not great. And I just didn't feel like I was getting what I needed to show what I could do. And what I really loved, and so going back to all full circle back to the very beginning and when I was racing go-karts, I loved this setting a goal and achieving it and this process. And so if I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to finish better, to have a better season, to accomplish more, for me, there was no more process to have. Like, I wanted the delta. What did I do last year and what did I do this year? I wanted to get better. I wanted to finish better. And I was not going to be able to drive for a better team than what I was at, because they were a pretty good team. And I then was going to also have to take a big pay cut. And I just was like, I'm not attached. I'm not afraid of change. It doesn't mean it's not scary. It's just like I'm willing to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I just hit a point where I just wasn't happy anymore. And I let the universe sort of take over. And I was like, look, if a sponsor comes along and they're wanting to do it and there's a team, like, I will race. But if there isn't, then I'm just gonna let the universe handle this one. And no sponsor came through, and I ended up being like, all right, I'm done. And I remember my dad came to North Carolina, and I remember talking to him and telling him, like, Dad, like, I don't really love racing. And I actually, like, never really loved actually racing. Like, I loved aspects of racing, and I've always felt like so hard for me to say that for the first times. First times meaning, like, to my dad, in public. But it wasn't my passion. Like, I think a passion is something you do no matter what. And I don't do it now. Like, I don't go play racing. I don't go like, hey, I don't, people have passions and they do them all the time. Even if it's just for fun. Right. And I just don't. And I loved aspects of it. And now I plug those aspects into other things in my life. And I'm plenty busy, trust me, but they're just doing other things. And it wasn't racing. Racing was just the medium. And so I was just ready. I was just like, all right, it's time to be done. And so then I announced at the end of 2017 at the last race that I was going to be done racing full time, and that I was going to finish my career doing the Indy 500 and the Daytona 500. So the Daytona 500 is February.
The Danica Double.
It's called the Danica Double because there's something in racing called the Double, and the Double was where you do the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 the same day. Indy 500's midday and Coke 600's at night, so that's 1,100 miles. And I actually wanted to do it. I thought it'd be kind of cool and interesting. And so the first year I didn't, because it was kind of the first year in NASCAR. And then the second year I was like, all right, let's try and do this. And this jerk of a team manager that I talked about, he told me, if you do this, everybody's going to question how serious you are. And I was like, okay. So I didn't do it. Yeah. And so I did what I call the Danica Double, which is just because it represented, the bulk of my career being in these two sports.
Are those the only two races you raced in 2018?
Yes.
And your sponsors or people were just like, yo, for this hype situation we're in? Yeah. So for
the first time, the sponsors were actually mine. So I went and got the sponsors and negotiated with the teams.
Got it.
So I had GoDaddy came back on board. They were off my car for a few years, but they came back on for these last two. And some others, and we went racing.
You made it happen. And the Daytona 500, you crashed.
Oh yeah, I crashed both of them.
Crashed both those races. You want to talk about the universe? Like,
it's time to be done.
Yeah, they're like, you're done.
Yeah, you're really done. You're done early.
That's like a bummer.
You're done early.
It is what it is.
Sorry, let me crack a go.
All good. All right. So in the meantime, you wrote another book. The other book is called Pretty Intense. This is a really good play on words. The Pretty Intense thing. And the book really is about, the subtitle is The 90-Day Mind, Body, and Food Plan That Will Absolutely Change Your Life by you. a book. Clearly, it's broken into 3 different sections. And this book is kind of like how you live your life. And actually,
totally.
We met at the CrossFit Games.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
this is when I was in the throes of CrossFit when I wrote this.
Throes of CrossFit. And just cool information. Like, you start off in the mind part. I'm going to read a couple of rules. 3 rules of happiness. Rule number 1, flow in the right direction. Remember, your thoughts are extremely powerful. You talk about that. Be light, be positive, keep your mind river flowing in the right direction. Rule number 2, start by assuming the best. I try to see the good in people and move through my day with the expectation that pretty much everyone is doing their best. It's a very positive attitude. Rule number 3, do the next healthy thing. You don't have to master these skills all at once. You don't have to completely change your outlook on life in an instant. Just do the next healthy thing. What I like about that. There's a thing they say. I didn't really have this attitude, but going through SEAL training, it was like, just make it to the next evolution. Just make it like whatever you're doing right now, surf torture, push-ups, freaking squats, boat carries, log PT, whatever you're doing, just make it, just do this thing. So this attitude of like, just do the next, don't think about you got to eat healthy for the next year. Echo Charles?
Yes, sir.
Just think about the next healthy thing.
The next meal.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to have for dinner?
And there you go. So pretty cool. And you got to look, I'm like going to completely summarize some of these sections, not going to read them all, but that's the type of thing that you talk about in this book, kind of what your mindset is.
Because the mind sets up the rest.
Yep.
So it's the first part.
You go into this here when we get into the body part. You say, a decade ago, I was exercising a lot, but I wasn't particularly happy with the way I looked. I was running 30 to 45 minutes every single day and doing yoga a couple times a week, but I didn't look like I spent a ton of time working out. Had a small frame, but no muscle definition. I was 95 pounds and didn't look that great. Now I weigh 110 pounds and I look far fitter. Back then, I never really thought about the level of intensity I was putting into my workouts. It was more about how long I went or how far I could go without stopping. Nowadays, the only running I do is short, fast, challenging, all-out intervals followed by a short walk recovery, repeated 15 to 20 times. Fast forward a little bit. High-intensity interval training, or HIIT, is the primary force behind my workouts nowadays. HIIT refers to simply to a workout in which you go hard at maximum intensity for a certain amount of time, then back off for a recovery period before going at it hard again. You can do HIIT workouts with weights, on a bike, in a pool, on a treadmill, basically whatever your favorite type of exercise you can modify to create an interval approach. And you got to look again. This is like good information for people. You go into the good positive things about HIIT. HIIT releases your bliss compound, which is like the
Dopamine.
Exercise.
And endorphins.
Yep. HIIT burns fat faster. HIIT builds endurance. You've got definitions around all this stuff. HIIT protects you from diabetes. HIIT builds muscle and keeps you young. HIIT gets the job done faster. HIIT makes you happier and less stress. And then HIIT is just more fun, which is only your opinion. But I have to agree with it. You really have that classic, the classic story arc of where you were working out before, and you've always been kind of into working out, but what you were doing was like long runs, long treadmill, long exercise bike. And what's interesting about you is, like you said earlier, you were in magazines and being photographed this whole time. Yeah. And you actually put in this book, you've got pictures of what you looked like when you exercised like that. Yep. Which, by the way, you were like 22 years old. 19 years old, 20 years old.
Everybody looks all right at 19.
Yeah, right? And
yet, a little baby.
And yet you've got pictures of you now.
Yeah.
And I think most people would be of the opinion that you look fitter and better now than you did then. It's not like you look bad back then, but you just fitter. And so you went from this trajectory of people training from, hey, I'm just going to run and that's kind of a workout. And if I sweated a lot, then I worked out hard. You got into the mode of like using resistance. Yeah. So lifting weights of some kind and then going hard, doing the high intensity training.
Making it difficult. Like, don't just say you went. Right. But like, show you went because you did.
Huge difference for people to think about if you're a person that's exercising and you're not kind of seeing the results you would hope for, there's a really strong possibility that you're not exercising with the kind of intensity that you need.
Yes. At the end of the day, if you aren't exercising with intensity and if you aren't weight training, so weights will always shape the body, right? Like you can change the size of your body with cardio and movement, but you're not going to change the shape of your body. And when you're looking at a picture, it's one thing in person, there's a little bit more, you can see in 3D what's going on. But if you're looking at a picture, what translates is shape. And so muscles are going to give you shape, and they also translate to leanness, because yes, you do need some level of leanness to be able to see muscle, but they give you shape. And so I'd say the only thing I'd add to this book, because this book I wrote in 2017, and it came out the beginning of 2018, is that, you can't go hard all the time. Mm-hmm. And I did not know that. And so when you can only pull a lever so many times, mm-hmm. and the body is incredible at dealing with the things that we put it through, mm-hmm. I'm sure you know very well.
Indeed.
But it does take a toll. So I've learned since then how important, because I went through a pretty big health journey in the last few years of, well, we can get into as much or as little as you want, but it really took my body away from that, and I gained weight and I looked different, and I was like, what's going on?
So what was going on?
One of the things is I did too much. I worked out too much. I would work out. Sometimes I go to CrossFit for like 2 hours. I do a class and I'd be like, hey, what do you want to do? What else do you want to do? And we just do a whole another workout. Mm-hmm. So much intensity, which is cortisol, and which spikes your cortisol. And then cortisol will dump the blood sugar from your muscles into your bloodstream. And so then you get into more of like storage, because you're using what's readily available instead of what's stored, and because it's getting dumped into the bloodstream. And so there's just so much trickle down effect that happens when you just are only doing hard stuff all the time. Also recovery. So I would just I didn't know what it was like to not be sore. I'd just always be like taxed. Mm-hmm. And so then your body's in a state of inflammation. So that's hard on the hormones. Then my diet was not ideal, meaning I was super good at it. Like I was very disciplined, but there's only so long that you can have a certain way of eating and restrict yourself. So I ate paleo forever. And so I didn't eat beans and grains and, carbohydrates really, other than starches like sweet potatoes and some squashes and stuff, and berries and fruit. But I was probably too restrictive in that way, and just like not nourishing the body and giving it what it needed totally. And then I had breast implants. So that was one of the vanity things that I did for myself as a girl back when I was like 32 and so 33. And I had them for 7.5 years, and I got them out 1.5 years ago. And so those things are toxic. So those things I had horrible gut health. I started my hair wasn't growing anymore. You can see in some of these pictures, I used to have super long hair. It just wasn't healthy anymore. So I cut it short, because I was like, well, maybe it's just age. And so it's finally growing out a little bit. But my hair wasn't as healthy, gut issues. I had super high heavy metals, some mold. All my hormones were tanked. All of them, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, everything. My cortisol spike was in the middle of the night instead of in the morning when I woke up. So it was kind of flip-flopped. So my adrenal function was totally screwed up. And so it took a couple years to get things back. And it's honestly finally the first time that I'm back where I was back then, when those photos, back in 2017. Mm-hmm. It's been a long journey.
Damn, that sounds like a rough one.
6-7 years of trailing off, gaining weight, not knowing why. It's one thing when you gain a few pounds, you're like, oh, well, okay. But then I probably went honestly from 110 pounds. I weighed 107 in these photos. Mm-hmm. But from 110 pounds to probably 125, which is a lot on someone like me, and to not have any way to fix it. I couldn't eat less. I couldn't work out more. Nothing worked. And my body was just in a total shutdown mode of we're not showing up for you anymore. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of time loving, not loving myself metaphorically, but being kind to my body, mm-hmm. Doing a workout and then having a recovery day. I used to take no rest days. It's in the book to not take a rest day, mm-hmm. because I said they happen naturally. And they did happen naturally for me, but you can't.
Oh, red flags over here for Jocko, because that's the same thing I say. I'm like, oh, you're going to get rest days, when you travel or when the water heater breaks.
Yeah, when you get sick that one day, or you just you have to. And that's what I would do. The rest days, they were a little bit more built in for me because I would go race every mm-hmm. weekend. So so they were a little bit more built in, but I just was take no rest days. I didn't do cheat meals either, because I'm I don't need that food. I don't crave a pizza. Mm-hmm. I don't crave feeling bad, because that's exactly what it made me do. But one of the problems is that my gut health was so bad that if I did eat anything, off the menu, it really did make me feel bad. Now I know I don't have that anymore, and I can eat whatever I want. And I don't choose to eat whatever I want. But if I do, I used to literally take a bite of something that was not on the paleo menu, and it would make me I would be bloated and uncomfortable. Now it doesn't do that to me. So it's like nice to be able to just like function and just be able to, oh yeah, I'll have a bite of that. Oh, that's nice. Okay, fine.
So what change did you make diet-wise?
I just went away from, I just started eating like complex carbohydrates again. So I started eating rice and oatmeal and, things like that. I still don't eat gluten on purpose, but if I do, it's okay. It doesn't bother me. It's not in my favorite foods anyway, so I don't love pasta. It's not my favorite. And I mean, pizza, I don't really care. I don't really get that often. I mean, I like it. It's fine, but it's not very nutritious. So. And
then what's the rest protocol looking like?
I literally only lift 3 days a week. That's it. And I walk other than that. Mm-hmm. That's it. I lift 3 days a week.
Echo Charles is a huge proponent of rest and rest days.
Where were you when I needed that info?
I was around. Probably resting.
Well, look at you. You're jacked. So clearly you know what to do.
Resting does work.
Look at Echo's. He rests those biceps on
look at you're wearing your muscles on the outside of your skin. They're so big.
That's the byproduct right there. It's the byproduct.
Yeah. Did you learn the hard way?
No. I was
fine then.
I always had rest programmed into the thing. I was a personal trainer at one point in my long life.
So you didn't have, so you did it on faith, or you did it on evidence of your results, or like, because if you love fitness, it's so easy to take fitness to the extreme.
Yeah, and still I'll do that too sometimes still, where, I do the no rest days and I feel good or whatever until the day comes. You're like, wait, I had like a few days in a row where my workouts are like shitty. Then I'm like, oh wait, I'm not gonna, and then I just won't. But no, the programming that I kind of, there's all kinds of approaches to exercise. Even just resistance training alone, there's so many protocols, and they all work if you do them correctly. So the one that I kind of stumbled upon early on had rest programmed in. And they explained really specifically why you need to rest this much at this time and stuff like that.
So you were convinced. The literature convinced you.
Oh yeah, and the program was so freaking effective at the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it still is, by the way. But
is this big beyond belief?
Big beyond belief. Leo Costa Jr. Hell yeah. But it's it's one of those deals where it's like, hey, these 3 protocols right here, like the exercise, what you do in the gym, what you do out, and the 2 outside of the gym, which is what you eat, and then how much you rest. Like you have to do all 3, otherwise the whole table collapses.
Yeah, protein is also very important. I forgot I took a little detour with protein. I watched What the Health at the end of 2017. And I was like, oh shoot, maybe I shouldn't eat meat anymore. And then I went through this mental game of like, maybe protein is like propaganda, and maybe we don't. And so then I stopped eating meat. I'd only eat fish at night pretty much. And I was eating like substitutes of things and protein powders and pea protein, which pea protein is laden with heavy metals because it's in plants. And so and fake eggs, and I was like, it was, and so that's another thing. So then I wasn't eating protein.
Do that for?
Years.
Oh yeah, I had a friend, and a friend that I lives on the other coast, and I'd see him occasionally, and his wife was like vegan, and so he became vegan, and I saw him, and he looked like terrible.
He probably looked gone.
I felt horrible when I saw him. I thought he said he came to my house. He's like, I have to talk to you, and I was like, oh God, he's got like cancer or something.
Yeah.
And it turns out that him and his wife were having some issues, and that's what he wanted to talk to me about. But when he said that to me, I'm like, oh, this is like, I'm about to lose my friend. And it wasn't that at all. He was going through a hard time with his wife, but I was like, dude, we're going out. Like, let's go, fill me in. And he starts talking to me, and he's like, well, I've been vegan. I was like, bro, we're going to get steak like right now.
Exactly.
We're going to get steak right now.
Oh.
I go, you look just like terrible, bro. This is not good. And sure enough, it's like one of those things, like you do that to your body, you take that protein away.
Totally. I mean, so look at all the stack of this. Too much working out, not enough protein, stress. I was in a stressful relationship. I had retired from racing. Like there was just so many things crashing down that my body went bye-bye. Mm-hmm. So rest is something that I would have to add as an amendment to this and just like, having some variation, but basically lift weights, have rest, eat enough protein, and be in a calorie deficit if you want to lose weight. Like that's it. It's not It's what it is. I also had someone try and convince me that calories didn't matter if your blood sugar didn't spike, because that's the mechanism. And I'm like, so, I like to try everything.
Yeah.
But I tried everything in the health department. Like I did peptides. I did EBU treatments, which I really loved, just like a blood dialysis. I did NAD. I don't know if you've tried NAD. Yep. I did a bunch of NAD. I did enemas. I did coffee enemas as well as like suppositories. Dang. I did. I mean, I tried everything, including like taking 40 pills a day and expensive urine, basically, is what that makes. Elimination diets from foods based on what my food sensitivity test showed. I did lymphatic massages. You name it. Like I did. It was exhausting, and it took so much time, and it took so much money. And I know that I have so many more resources in that department, and I know so many more people. But what I said the whole time, everybody was like, "You're just also getting older." I'm 41 now, and they were like, "You're 39 or you're 40, and like that's just what happens." And you know what I said? Fuck that. Yeah. That's not how it's going down. There is no reason why I can't look the way I want to look, feel the way I want to feel. I'm not buying it. I'm living till 120, and this is not how it's going for me. And guess what? I look like I did when I was in this book.
Yeah, you do. Freaking outstanding. Now this book comes out. What else? You got all kinds of crazy things going on right now. You got a wine company. You make wine.
I do. I love wine. I went to Napa Valley back in 2006 on a vacation, and I was standing. So the trip started off with going to French Laundry, which is a super fancy restaurant with a tasting menu. And
oh yeah, that's where Gavin Newsom went.
That's
during
right.
the lockdown.
Yeah, because
he got in a lot of trouble for that one.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't go to a restaurant. He went to the best restaurant, and he was maskless, and you got to practice what you preach, man. Especially, I mean, what do you expect when you go to a public place and you're not following the rules? Like, what that shows is that he's never following the rules, right? Because when someone like gets caught in a situation where you're like, duh, like that means they're doing it all the time and they're not getting caught. So they just think they're not going to get caught. It's like when people cheat, and they get away with it and they're like, oh, and then they just start getting sloppy because they think they're never going to get caught. And then you're like, dude, what? How did you? How many more women? Like these guys. I mean, girls can do it too. I'm not just. So I went to French Laundry for dinner, and then there was a wine tasting set up for 10 a.m. the next day, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Like, I'll be just so not feeling good from dinner because it's going to be 20 courses and so much wine, and I didn't, and it's a much more sophisticated experience than that. So go up to it was at Quintessa, went up to the top of this property on like one of their trucks and got out, and there's rose petals leading out to the end of the knoll with a picnic table and quiches and fruit and wine and everything, and I'm swirling my white wine at 10 a.m., which is 100% acceptable in Napa Valley. And I just remember standing there going, man, it'd be really cool to have something like this someday. And I thought to myself, but I don't have $50 million yet. And so I was like, I thought it cost $50 million. I just made up a number. And I thought, and I also knew was able to be put on the end of this because I'm, again, only like 25. And so that was the seed.
Danica Mania into that time frame.
It was. I was in it. It was 2006. So it was just, a year and a half after it got really going. And I thought that it was just an idea. So this is a total example of thoughts become things and how important it is to, think about what's going through your head and know what you want. And think about what you actually want, because this was a seed idea. Literally said in my own inner monologue, this would be really cool. And then 2 years later, went back out there on a trip, and the winemaker at Quintessa was now working for some other people. He was like, oh, you come back to the valley, let me know. So I did, and went up and visited him, and also went and saw some properties. Like, oh, I wonder what it's like. How expensive is it? No, let's check out Sonoma. Maybe that's the right area. And I'm like, nope, Napa Valley. Came back over, found something I liked, and ended up buying it at the beginning of 2009, and started working on planting the vineyard, and it started from dirt. And so it starts from scratch. So I didn't need $50 million, but I did need some millions. And, you start by buying the property and then you plant it. And I finally had a bottle of wine for sale in 2017. So, it's a long game process, and I'm still in the hole, and I still have to put money into it, but it's totally a passion project. And really all of my companies outside of racing. So what I loved and really revered and respected about what I was able to do in racing was that just being out there was enough for people. Just being out there was inspiring to people, and it was never enough for me. I don't know. I'm curious, actually, when you hear athletes saying things like, "I'm just honored to be here," does that resonate with you? I'm at the Olympics. I'm just honored to be here.
Meaning, I'm not here to win. I'm just happy to be.
Well, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really resonate with me.
It doesn't resonate at all with me.
The only way it would resonate with me is if I was making sure I was mentally staying humble and being like, hey, it's an honor to be here representing the United States of America, and I'm going to pour everything I can into this competition.
Yeah, yeah.
Something like that, I could understand.
Okay, yeah.
But just being like, yo, I'm just happy to be here.
And maybe it's my own triggers, seeing it as because I have so much of wanting more. And look, clearly it didn't result in me winning all the time. I didn't win all the time, but I had that level of drive. And so I don't know if I would have accomplished what I did if I didn't have the level of drive that I couldn't even relate to someone, even if they were just putting sort of a nice, humble answer together. I was so much more I have to go out there and I have to do it. So I wonder, would I have had a worse, a less successful career if I wouldn't have thought the way I thought? I'm not sure. Would it have been better? I don't know. I can't do it over. So I just can't relate to that. And so everything I want to do at a really high level. And so I start this winery, and I do it with the best. I'm doing it with the makers picking the property, and the winemakers picking the grapes, and the farmers, and so we make great wine.
And it's doing okay?
Yeah. I mean, it still costs money, but it makes money. But it's things also cost money, and then you have to. It takes money to make money. So then it's open up the tasting room in Calistoga, and then we need this new equipment, and then a fire came through your property. Now that's expensive too, and so.
How often do you go up there and just chill?
Not that often. I go up there a couple times a year, but I also do a lot of events outside of it. So, but yeah, it's just thoughts become things. And it was just this idea of and that's why the name of the wine is called Somnium, which is a Latin word that just means to dream. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have ideas? Well, I shouldn't ask you this question. I should just say sometimes I have ideas and they're dumb.
I definitely.
Where I'm glad I didn't do that thing because it wouldn't have been smart.
I have so many ideas. We started and I was guys, my idea for a new company being to do a driving school, but a school for driving license, not racing license, and teach 16-year-olds how to drive so that we can have a new generation of better drivers, because the curriculum that's 70 years old can't. No. It needs and must need an update. And it definitely wasn't written by a race car driver, I'm sure. So if I drive well on the road, well is, I suppose, up for negotiation because I don't follow the rules, but the rules are just a little tame for me. So, and I can do that, and I have a large comfort zone because I have a good experience. So I'm maybe I should do a driving school. But I have tons of ideas, and will that ever come to fruition? I don't know. I mean, my idea that I didn't even say out loud came to fruition and started a winery from scratch. So thoughts become things. You have to be careful of what it is that you're putting your mind on. My manifestation of things goes really fast. If I want a house, I'm I want a house, and then I'll just buy a house within a year. I'm oh shoot, that happened really fast.
What made you decide? Because you have your own podcast.
Yes.
What made you decide to start that?
I like talking to people, and I like asking questions, and I like learning about people. And I realized that my empathy is in the form of understanding. So I'm not one of these people that feels your feelings. I'm not crying when you're crying. And I have a lot of empathy for dogs and animals. That's where mine lies. Like I can literally see a dog suffering in a video and I start crying, or I'll just swipe. I can't even watch it, you know? But humans, I'm like, eh.
Yeah. Suck it up.
It's right. I know. I had an expression that I said for years, which is try harder. Literally try harder. Everyone knew it. And I try harder is also why I had to tell you the health story, by the way. Or the health journey. But I'm a hard charger.
And I was listening to your podcast, and one of the things you did, you were talking about doing like ayahuasca.
Yeah.
You've done that.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, I'm very curious about the mystical world. I love being in the mystery. So I don't buy it all. I don't think that it's all true necessarily. But I'm very curious. Like even when I got married, I became a Catholic. And so I went to catechism classes. Mm-hmm. I get that word a little messed up sometimes. But I was always such a skeptic. I would question everything. Like one of them was like, why do we not meet on Fridays during Lent? If you're going to do it, why are you doing it? And I was like, oh, because it was a luxury back in the day. I'm like, oh, well then, so I just picked something that's a luxury because it's not me. I mean, it's not a luxury. That's like normal now. So I'm like, I want to know why. So my like understanding is really important. So I love to understand people. And so I ask a lot of questions, and it can read off in not a podcast setting, in a regular life setting. Like if you're telling me about something going on, I'm like, oh, and then I just dive into it, and I'm not really like hearing you out and just sort of holding the space to listen. I start asking questions. You might think I'm actually like doubting you or questioning you or like not buying it or just not very sensitive to you, and maybe you even get defensive. But that's how I understand you. It's how I can relate. It's just my empathy language is
You're
understanding.
Intensely curious.
Yeah. I love to get layers and layers deeper. So, ayahuasca is one of those things that gives you access to these other spaces that are to learn. I love to learn about myself too. And sometimes doing podcasts, actually, anytime I do interviews, I learn about myself because I'm willing to process out loud. So I really just love to learn about myself. So I planned a trip and it was back. I mean, Aaron has talked about it. This is when I was with Aaron, and he talked about it on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and it was my Christmas present to him.
And what did you see?
It didn't work out for me. I don't know. It worked out all in the end because we went in March of 2020, and there was a trip was supposed to be like 4 or 5 days in Machu Picchu, and then and in Peru.
Also, right as COVID kicked off. Literally.
Well, this is the story. And then the second half of the trip was supposed to go to Patagonia and like have a relaxing part of the trip. And then all the stuff with COVID was kind of coming along, and there was another couple with us, and they have children. And so they were a little bit more like up on what was going on in the world. And I'm very Pollyanna when it comes to how everything's going to work out. I totally think everything's going to work out. I don't know where I got that, but I do. And I was like, it's fine. It's no big deal. Everything's fine. And then it was like, okay, well, all right, maybe we won't go to Patagonia. I guess we could go home. And like the luxury was Aaron had a plane. So everything was very flexible. And so it was like, well, we'll do integration, because you have to do integration afterwards to talk about the experience and what happened, and really like take the information, because doing the medicine is not necessarily it's not the work. It can be work because you can get kind of sick, and I did, but it's sort of where it shows you something. It gives you some information, and then what you do with it is really the process. So the integration is important to talk about what happened, and then so we were going to stay for the day, like during the day, and then fly home, and then in the second ceremony, middle of the night, and pop up. Because the shamans are like, Danica, Aaron, wake up. The pilot's called. And we're like, what? And I like, what? And I sat up, and it was like, they say we need to leave. The borders are closing by 10 a.m. And I was like, what? And so it was midnight, and we had to leave by like 6 a.m. to go to the airport because the border was shutting. And so we had to find like a big enough vehicle to get us all. Anyway, so go back to the room, pack up, and leave in the morning and do integration on the plane. Took the shamans home because they actually lived in Costa Rica. And the only country open on the way home to California was Costa Rica. And if we would have left in the afternoon, we would have had to stop in Lima because of the altitude. We wouldn't have had enough fuel to get to Costa Rica. So leaving early, it was cooler, and we actually were able to get all the way to Costa Rica. So like it was by the skin of our teeth we got out of there. And that's the ayahuasca story. And
did you like discover anything deep and meaningful about yourself?
I did.
That you could apply?
I did. And I didn't. I haven't done ayahuasca since then. Mm-hmm. I've been applying it for years, working on applying it, which was basically, I had this idea that I would find a partner that would complete me, that would make me, that would be like a perfect balance, and like would be, everything was like perfectly symbiotic. It was like everything was magical, and we loved each other reciprocally, and everything was just perfect. I just thought that somebody would complete that circle, and I was shown that I was not going to get that, and that I was going to have to get it with myself. Damn. It was only going to come from yourself, and I was really, 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 really sad about that. I was really sad, and I cried a lot. And then after I sort of was like, okay, in this experience, in my mind, I accepted, and it was like, you actually will get what you'll get what you want. Actually, it just won't happen until you find it with yourself first. Yeah. Like the feeling you're looking for, you can't find it with someone else until you find it with yourself first. So that is what's been happening over the last few years. And then, and honestly, like I had people ask how my life's going. I'm like, wow. Really fun. It's a really good life. And I don't look at relationships like I used to, being super codependent and feeling like I had to adapt. Because remember the conversation about my dad and about like not being good enough. I would always overcompensate and always try and fix myself or change something. And I'd always take it so personally. I'd always be like, if somebody didn't like me, it's like, what's wrong with me? And something's wrong with me. And it was something I needed to fix. And now I look at it, I'm like, well, doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means we're not right. Like people can be great people, but not match, And I also used to mistake sameness for compatibility. Ooh. And that was a problem too, because, you don't want someone that's exactly the same as you. You need someone that complements you in certain ways. Like you can't have two alphas, right? You can't have people that, you can't have one person that always wants to go out and one person that never wants to go out. Like you have to be compatible, and sameness is not compatibility. So yeah, I learned a humongous lesson. It was honestly, of all the things that I've done, and I've done other things. I've done mushrooms. I've done a mushroom journey. I've done one like specific one that was a very high dose to learn.
Is this the heroic dose?
I did a hero's dose. I did a 5 grams.
Don't you see death or something like this?
No, I did have a little bit of a moment where it was at one point in time, there was this energy of like collective energy of people that was like, oh, come this way. And it was like upward. They're like, and they said, if you want to be an ascended master, you have to leave your form behind. Just come on. And I was like looking up going, no, I think I want to be human. And I had to choose to be human. And then I came back down. And then from that point on in the experience, I had to build every construct that it took to being human again. And the first one that I had to agree to was the mind. I had to agree to this construct that's not real. And in the experience at first, I knew that this was not real. And I was like, oh shoot, how am I ever going to come back? Because I know it's not real. And you actually have to believe it's real to be in this experience. And the first thing I thought was, my sister's going to be so mad at me. Because she just does not understand this part of me. She's like a mom of 4. She loves being home. She doesn't do any of this stuff. And I was like, my sister's going to be so mad at me. And I'm going to miss my family. And I was like, oh, shoot. But I built those constructs back to being human. And then I also feel like I understood why we have amnesia as people. Why don't we remember where we came from? What's the point? Why don't we know? And that's because if we knew the full extent of the truth, then we wouldn't be able to play this game, because we have to forget to play the game.
Right on.
Have you ever done any? I'm guessing you probably haven't done any of that stuff.
No.
It might not call you, and it has to call you.
Yeah, I've not done any of that stuff. I've never even smoked pot before. So like I drank for a while when I was in the SEAL teams. There's a big drinking culture, and I got like, that's what we're doing. Okay, cool. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then pretty much when I got out of the teams, I didn't have any reason to drink anymore. And I just kind of stopped drinking. And that was that. And now I'm definitely anti-alcohol.
Yeah.
And I've become more and more anti-alcohol because it really messes some people up. And
you mean just like on a like sleep and that, or do you mean like mentally, like they just, it's a coping mechanism?
Like the sleep stuff, I kind of feel like whatever. Hey, but when people, I've seen lives get destroyed, you know, through alcohol. And I look at it like probably, I don't know what the number is, but out of every 100 people that drink, there's probably 97 of them that are going to be totally perfectly fine and good to go.
Yep.
And there's 3 of them that it's going to wreck their lives. And they don't know who they are.
Yep.
You know, you don't know who you are.
Yep.
You don't know if you're one of those people. And so you just get sent down a downward spiral. And so I just can't really support it. And then the freaking ayahuasca and stuff, you know, it's like a big thing in the veterans right now.
Yeah. Oh,
huge
well,
thing.
I mean, have you heard, Bob Parsons, who owned GoDaddy, he was in the Marines, and he contributes coming home to doing LSD, mushrooms, ayahuasca, doing those experiences helped him finally come home. And he's an advocate for others to do the same, to like it. He's talked about it publicly. Like it was, for him, it was very important. Yeah.
And so I have a bunch of friends that have done it. I have a bunch of friends that are working with organizations to grow it and make it more accessible to people. I just feel fine.
And you don't need it.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. You don't need it.
And so the way I described it to some of my friends that were like, oh, you should try it. And I'm like, I feel like, and you can relate to this analogy that I've given, that I feel like I'm going down the highway at 80 miles an hour. And you want me to pull my car over, take the engine apart, and then put it back together, and then like start driving again and hope that everything works? Like,
it's not for everybody.
I don't really think I need to do that. I really don't want to take that risk because, you know, the screw gets left out or whatever. You know, like the cotter pin that your dad left off the freaking brake. Like, I don't really need that to be happening with my brain, so it makes me a little bit nervous. But yeah, so
true.
But I have friends that have been helped immensely by it, so I'm not like anti the medicine. Called the medicine. I'm not anti.
It sounds a lot better than drug.
Yeah, I'm not anti the drug, or anti the medicine, but it's not for me. And
but it is also used more medically in my mind. Like there's sometimes I use mushrooms recreationally, but I mean when I'm talking about the ayahuasca experience, like the hero's dose, that was I was using it not to escape or not to. I wanted to have a deeper experience.
Yeah, and like I said, I have some friends that have absolutely been helped in a huge way by it.
So great.
I am hearing now that there's some people that it's not helping and it's making it worse. So that's not a story that is getting propagated very much.
Right.
I'm not sure why it's getting not propagated. Probably because they're kind of, you know, when you're going in the downward spiral, you don't say, oh, let me come on a podcast and tell you about how fucked up I am now.
Well, if it's also a downward spiral, it might mean they keep doing it. Maybe they're using it as a coping. Maybe they're not actually doing the work and they're just doing the drug or doing the medicine. And it's not really being used as medicine. It's being used as, like they would call it in the spiritual world, like a spiritual bypass, or you're sort of bypassing the actual work that it's meant to provide you, as opposed to, so you're just doing it to do it. You know, you're like, oh, if I do this, then but it's not like I've only had truly 2 real experiences. And I mean, over the course of from 2020 until, you know, for over 3.5 years, I've only had 2 experiences, and they have shown me so much. And you can integrate for years. The ayahuasca experience in 2020, I've been integrating for years.
When you stopped racing, was it like a weight off your back? Did you feel like when you were racing, was it always like, how am I going to do? How am I going to do? How am I going to do? Everyone's watching. Did you feel like massive pressure for those 25 years or whatever it was that you raced?
I did. And then...
Did that leave a mark?
I think that was, you know, I mean, I retired and all this stuff. I mean, so that could have been my body also, just like nothing's free, you know, as they've, you know, many great philosophers have said, and psychologists, that nothing is free. I think Jordan Peterson's the one that comes to mind. You know, you just don't get away with anything in life. And so I can't get away with working that hard, being that stressed, putting myself in so many compromising positions, emotionally, physically, mentally, and not have some sort of like comeback from that, right? Some sort of rebalance that my body and mind need. And so I mean, yeah, it was very stressful to the point where now I do this F1 stuff, and I've been asked by multiple teams. Like at the end of last year, Red Bull was like, oh, like there was a word like, hey, we'd like to put you in a car, not to race, but just to drive it. Like, do you want to drive a Formula One car? And I didn't, honestly. I was like, hard for me to say. I feel bad. I feel like I should just, oh yeah, no problem. Honestly, I don't have the confidence. Like it's too much stress. It's too much pressure. I trust that I would be able to do what I do, but I am not ready for what it takes. So when I say yes to anything, I'm saying yes to everything, which means like I'm not just yes and then I wing it like when I say yes, I'm saying yes to the whole kit and caboodle, because I know I don't want to be bad at anything. So backtrack to 2018, I was asked to do the ESPYs, to host the ESPYs, and at first I didn't know if I should do it or not. And it took a long time for me to decide, because I knew that like I'm not funny, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a singer. I'm like, what? Why me? Right? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really I'm not like a present the ESPYs kind of person. I'm not Drake. I'm not Justin Timberlake. I'm not Jimmy Kimmel. Like I don't know what I bring to the table. And so it took a long time to decide, because I knew that it was going to require me to like find that. What is that thing about me that I can put on stage that will be somewhat entertaining? And so I knew that it would require me to dig pretty deep and do a lot of work. And so it took a long time to say yes, because I knew I was saying yes to all the work. And I do it's the same for everything I do. Everything I do.
So this whole post-racing life, it's been like a journey.
It goes kicking in, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I like that. This whole post-race life, that's where you're at now. And it seems like you're in a pretty awesome spot.
Yeah, I feel like I'm having so much fun in life. I mean, I work a lot right now. I do need a break. I'm ready for that. I feel like I've been going since basically May, like almost every day. I had 1 week where I did nothing when I got back. So I left in May for the Indy 500. I was at home for about 3 weeks in Indiana with my family, and I did the Indy 500. I did Montreal F1 race. I did some work in between, and then I went to Europe for 6 weeks and vacationed, which, look, it's a vacation. I get it, but I'm not home. And I was traveling somewhere every 3 to 5 days. And then I finished
That's
up.
not a vacation.
Yeah.
In my opinion, going to some other country, people talking other languages, being in a different room, getting on a train, like all this stuff.
It was a lot of work. There was a lot of work in there.
I don't want any of that.
So then I finished up with Budapest for Formula One, and then I flew back to Indiana, and I did some more. That's actually where I ended up staying longer in Indiana, because it was 120,000 degrees in Scottsdale. And I was like, and my sister is obsessed with CrossFit, and I love it, but I don't do it anymore. And so she loves going to the games. She follows all the athletes. She knows how they're doing. She watches the competitions. I watch none. But I don't mind. I love going to the games too. It's fun. I love watching competition. And so I'll go to any sporting event. And except cricket, that seems like it would be really boring. Sorry for the cricket fans out there. But I was like, all right, I'll stay and we'll go to the CrossFit Games.
Cricket's the number 2 most popular sport in the world after soccer.
I'm obviously missing something.
There's like something that just happened in India, and it was like the most watched thing of all time. Crazy. Yep. So, yeah, cool.
I'm wrong, obviously.
Go ahead, Danica. Just talk smack about most of the world playing their cricket games.
Exactly. This is why people don't all like me. But at least you can respect my authenticity. I don't like cricket. But many do, and so I'm missing something. And so I decided, I was like, all right, well, fine, I'll stay. And then we'll go to the CrossFit Games. And I was so lucky to meet you. And the way that happened, I was like thinking, oh my God, Jocko's sponsoring this. I was like, I wonder if he's going to be here. I so want to meet Jocko. And so then a couple days had gone by. You came to the last day.
Yeah.
And I didn't think you were coming. And I was like, that would make sense. I understand that. And maybe you're just sponsoring it, and that's totally fine. And then I don't know if it was your manager or like someone that was managing the new product line.
Someone in the crew or whatever.
Someone in the crew.
The team.
And so somebody said you were there, and I was like, oh, great. And then you guys started walking towards the direction that I was in, and he looked over at me and waved and was like, Danica. And I was like, perfect. And I might have said hi to him, but I can't remember for sure or not. But I was like, hi, and I went over right to you, and I just started talking. And I realized that this is the direct me, as I just like go right in.
Well, they said something to me like, they're like, hey, Danica Patrick's here. Would you? I'm like, where's she at? Let's go. Let's go say what's up.
Oh my God, great. Well, I'm so flattered that we had equal interest, or at least interest. And so sometimes I don't know if anybody even knows, doesn't even know who I am. That's totally fine too. But we had a great little 15-20 minute conversation that we decided we'd end up finishing this way.
I brought you drinks.
You did, which is so good. I mean, I've finished all the cookies. By the way, the cookies are like the best snack.
They're a very good snack.
I don't know why they're so satiating, but I that and a cup of coffee is, and they're gone. I've ate them all. The drinks are so good. There's a pink lemon. I like the pink mist, but I also like the sweeter one, the Savage one. That's a little of the sweeter one. Yeah. But the pink lemonade's great.
We have coffee flavored milk coming.
Oh, stop it.
No, I'm serious.
Oh, that's going down.
Yeah, it's going down.
That's going down.
I don't really like coffee, but of course I had to try it, and it tastes kind of like tiramisu, like that coffee flavor. It's so good. It's ridiculous.
So the products are seriously like well done.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and the drinks really do work. The Go's really go.
Yes, they do. They're for real.
What is it that makes you go so much with the Go?
It's really the nootropic. So there's only 95 milligrams of caffeine in there, but it's got alpha GPC, it's got thermobromine, so it's got other things in it that make it feel like it's more than caffeine.
Oh, 100%.
But it doesn't get you all jittery. So yeah, we put a lot into it.
Go works.
Yeah, Go works.
So basically today I've drank a milk for breakfast, and I haven't drank enough water. I've definitely been drinking all these liquids.
That's my life right there. Milk for breakfast, maybe a Go for podcast, and then it's on. What does that get us up to speed? We good? Does that get us up to speed? We covered your podcast. We covered your wine. Oh, I heard in your podcast you make candles.
I do. I have candles.
You make candles?
Yeah. So I took a trip. Actually, I'm headed to Egypt in a few more days again. I went to Egypt at the beginning of 2021, and I'm obsessed with, obviously loving the deep ancient history as much as I love excavating, like, the nature of reality, which is where sort of those plant medicines come in. And so I love it, and I love Egypt, and I went there in 2021, and at the end of the trip we went and visited this aromacologist, and he was telling us about the smells and what they do, and the sort of the biochemistry reaction to everything from myrrh to frankincense and all these different oils. And so I bought $500 worth of oils and brought them home. And so I ended up making these candles. I made 4 different candles out of it. And they're curated for different places in the house based on sort of the essential oils and the vibe that each one has. And so they are really good. And they're in a wine glass. So when you're done with it, you just wash it and you have a wine glass. So it's called Voyant, which is
have your wine.
Yeah, exactly. Voyant means the seer. So it's kind of about sort of seeing more of the truth.
Right. So what? Anything else? Anything else I'm missing?
No, I mean, race broadcasting and podcasting and wine and candles, and I feel like I always forget one, but let's just call that good. Let's call that.
Some sponsor got
some. My new sponsors are all in the health and wellness industry. They're
awesome.
They're like stem cells and PRP and like all kinds of super cool stuff. So I'm into all that as well. But
very cool.
Yeah, I mean that's an incredible deep dive on my life.
Well.
Was there any stories that surprised you?
Well, I did a lot of research, so I didn't think I was going to get surprised. I mean, obviously, it's the first time you talked about that one deal where you had to work through some sponsorship and some payment and stuff like that. So that's the kind of one I hadn't heard before. But, in reading your books and then doing research and watching interviews with you and stuff like that, I don't think I got surprised. No, I didn't get surprised. But I definitely, it's interesting. I guess the parts that you didn't really talk about in some of the other things was just like, what I wanted to know was, first of all, like how you're dealing with fear. And I'm always interested in someone that's really talented at something and what it seems like for them to be talented in that thing. And do you realize how talented you are? And when do you realize that? And at a certain point being like, well, I wasn't as talented as this other person who was more talented than me, and that's why they were able to win, and I was only able to get 4th place or 7th place. I was only able to win. Like, that's a real thing that people contend with in life. And everyone has to deal with that unless you're like Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, how many people just get to be like, oh, I'm literally the best person in the world? Not many people get to do that.
Even like a story, Lewis Hamilton's won 7 championships. Was so close to winning his 8th a couple of years ago, and it was a very controversial ending to the Formula One season with Max Verstappen, and he won. But even, we were just, I don't know when this is coming out. I don't know if I can include this, but I'm going to be in the new Drive to Survive series season.
Nice.
And so we were doing a huge sit down for like 6 hours the other day. And one of the things that came through was like Lewis at one point, like in the year, has like doubted his talent. So you can be the best in the world and still doubt yourself. I doubted myself all the time. The amount of times I would go back to the bus and cry about how I qualified or what happened, like all the time. I mean, it's just human. I think it's just, I think it's part of being good at things too, is like you have to get better, you have to think you need to. Right?
Yeah.
No. And I always I'm like, I'm not the best at anything I do.
That's the same with me. And I think that's the same with people that are constantly trying to get better. They're like, because let's face it, if you're like, oh, I'm the best driver, well, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't go on the bus and cry. You just sit there and be like,
100%.
That was only because the car, that was only because the track, or that
100%.
was only, instead of being like, I wish I would have done this better.
Yeah.
How can I fix it?
Yeah. I'm always growing, always learning. And if there's one thing that is like the point of life to me, it's to grow and evolve.
Yes, indeed. People can find you. You're at DanicaPatrick.com. You can pretty much link to everything from there. You got a YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Danica Patrick, which is very nice, very easy. Echo Charles, you got any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Here
we go.
I'm hopeful that I'm going to be oval respectful on these. But hey, one never know.
You can't make a mistake right now.
Okay, there we go.
Your intention is because you care and you're curious. And
Yes,
that's all
ma'am.
that matters.
You ever watch Days of Thunder?
I totally have seen Days of Thunder.
Is that your jam?
Excellent movie.
Oh, okay. That was the question because that.
I love the way that they describe drafting.
Yes. That was going to be one of my questions. So it's not accurate. That's not a thing.
No, it's good. I'm just laughing because he was like using sugar packets on Nicole Kidman's leg.
Yeah. Well, you got to make it romantic for sure. But he was talking about losing his ride.
Yeah.
Remember? Right?
Yeah.
And that's what you were talking about, like the ride or whatever. That was always hard to understand.
Yeah, losing your ride just means you're out of the seat, out of the team. You need to find a new ride. You need to find a new team and a new car to drive.
Yeah, so it's almost like more than two, but those two main working parts. You got the driver, you got the car, and they can kind of interchange, kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah. The driver can plug into a new team that has a car.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you a defensive driver on the regular streets?
I'm an offensive driver.
That makes sense to me completely.
I actually if someone wants to go faster than me, I want them to, because I'm already driving fast.
Okay.
Like, to me, they're a rabbit. Go catch the cops for me. Like, if I'm doing 85 on the highway or 90 and someone passes me, I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
If you're at a stoplight and someone like pulls up by you and like revs their engine, is it on?
I look at them like I look it over and I'm like, you have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
And I'll 2-foot it at that point in time. If it's really on, you got to take your right foot off the brake and put your left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas, and you trim some transition time down. Yeah, you got to make sure that thing's not on auto restart. You don't want to have to start it back up before you no sport mode, baby.
Okay. All right. Last insight to be gained. You ever play the game Mario Kart?
Of when I was a kid. I don't play video games, but when I was a kid, I played like Duck Hunt, Track and Field, Super Mario Brothers, and then Mario Kart.
Yeah, Mario Kart. I figured that'd be the jam.
Wait, so Mario Kart is a video game about driving a go-kart?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. So Super Mario Brothers.
It's exactly like you can pick up mushrooms that give you special powers.
Oh yeah, that make you faster. Oh yeah.
See, mushrooms.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Oh yeah, layers.
And wait, so it's good? It's good?
Oh yeah.
It's old.
To me, Mario Kart, especially the old one, the OG GameCube or whatever. Not the they update them and stuff.
Did you get that old school Nintendo that came out a few years back where they're like, oh, we're gonna kick it old school? Oh, you got that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, big time. It's a little USB. It's like a chip, has all the games in it. Oh yeah, for sure. Dr. Mario all day. But Mario Kart is GameCube though. That's later, and that feels like something you'd be into. Yeah,
I did play it when I was young. Yeah, but I didn't keep going. I'm not a big fan of video games.
You didn't go pro. You like the real thing.
I didn't go pro in that. No, exactly. Yeah,
that makes sense.
I feel like video games are. I feel like guys love video games. Like a lot of guys like video games.
Same thing with car racing usually.
Guys like a lot of that too. That's true.
It's
one
of those
total
I don't
fair.
know.
Look at Echo Charles.
Respect.
But hey, do what you dig, sister. You're doing great. Great to meet you in real life.
Thank you.
Danica, any closing thoughts?
Man, just thoughts become things. Your mind is super powerful. Know who you are. Find out who you are. Don't be afraid of alone time. That's, I think, where you really, really figure it out. And try and trust that try to accountability. I think, accountability. Honestly, if there's one thing that I'm the most proud of myself for, it's learning accountability. It's actually saying like, oh, I'm sorry, or what is this situation saying about me? And I'm sure I don't get it right at all the time, but being more and more accountable all the time in my life for the reality that I live in is super powerful. Super powerful.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. You've lived a freaking wild life doing wild stuff. It's pretty amazing. And you're sharing your stories, you're sharing your lessons learned. And I know you've inspired a ton of people, and you're continuing to inspire them today. So thanks for what you've been doing. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Danica Patrick has left the building. And then I recorded a podcast with Danica Patrick. Nice. And now we're doing the support section. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. Pretty cool she interviewed me, or I interviewed her. Is that an interview? Or is it a discussion? Isn't an interview like I'm asking you questions?
Yeah.
This is more like a talk or an exploration or a discussion, right?
I like the exploration.
I would have a hard time classifying that as an interview. Like if someone said, oh, did you interview Danica Patrick? I'd say, well, no, but we talked about like her life and asked questions.
It's a gray area, I guess. Right? Technically, was there questions asked? Yes. She answered them,
What's the fastest you've ever gone in a car?
Fastest I ever gone in a car.
Or a motorcycle?
Obviously not nearly as fast. Like 200 miles per hour to me is psychotic. Like that's going back in time.
And that's the norm.
Yeah. So 115. I remember that going down. I can't remember going faster than that.
I got a 140. I got a $140.
Dang.
But
in a car or motorcycle?
Yeah, car. JP. Yeah. Danelle.
Hell yeah.
Me and Sarge were in Vegas for the UFC. Yeah. And so we were like up there cornering somebody, coaching somebody, something like this. And JP was like, we had tickets, we had backstage, we had the whole 9 yards. So I texted JP, something like, hey bro, just FYI, I'm in Vegas going to UFC, got tickets, got whatever. And he's like, on my way, right? And at this time, he had one of those kind of legit Chrysler 300s. Yep. You remember when those cars were pretty hyped?
Oh yeah, when they first kind of came out.
Yeah, but then they put like a big Hemi engine in them and souped it up a little bit. So he had one of those legit Hemi Chrysler 300s. And so I texted him like, hey bro, like, what's your ETA? He sent me like a picture back. He's doing like a $147 on the highway, just freaking hauling the mail. JP used to race motorcycles. Like it's a like JP is why insurance is high for young men. That makes sense. Right? Yeah. Teenage kid. Can you imagine trying to insure JP Danelle for a vehicle when he's 17 or 16?
Yeah.
There's no, you need to put it needs to be $1,000 a day.
Yeah. It's very unrealistic. Yes.
Because he is going to get after it.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Isle of Man race? It's a motorcycle race.
Yeah,
and it's around this island, and it's motorcycles, and they're going 160 miles an hour, but it's just a road, and there'll be like a stone wall next to it, and these guys get a little bit of air, and they're just hauling ass. There's buildings because it's in the Isle of Man, so there's buildings like on the road. You know how in England and in Ireland and in those parts of the world, there's a road and there's like a pub that when you take one footstep outside the pub, you're on the street. Yeah. It's like that kind of thing. And these are old stone buildings and stuff.
Sure.
And people die every year. Damn. Yeah. Like every year. But let's say JP got a terminal disease. I would sponsor JP for I Love Man TT. I would sponsor him and buy him a sick motorcycle, a sick set of leathers, and just like echelon front Jocko fuel.
Just go.
Just freaking get some.
Turn them loose.
Because can you imagine, look, JP taking risks as a normal person, but then imagine he's dying. He's going to win that race or he's going to die. First of all, his normal state of mind would be he's either going to die or win the race.
That's normal.
But if he was dying, the reason I would only sponsor him if he had a terminal disease is because if he didn't have a terminal disease, now I just gave him one. I gave him the disease of victory because he'll do anything. But yeah, talking to Danica, she got conditioned, right, to just speed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not that big of a deal to her. But yeah, 200 miles an hour, 220 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Other cars are 6 inches away, 8 inches away. That's hauling ass.
Yeah.
That's hauling ass. And again, the pressure that I talked to her about, that's a lot of pressure to be under all the time. The whole world was watching her, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone, how'd she do? How'd she do?
Yeah,
How'd
with
she
the hype.
do? Yeah, the hype. She was what's the term they use in MMA when someone's like super hyped? The hype train. Like she was just hype trained for years.
Yeah.
So a lot of pressure.
Making a big splash.
And also interesting to hear her kind of, getting healthy and how she kind of, she didn't fall. Here's the interesting thing. She didn't fall off the path from a discipline perspective. She just was doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
You know, lots of long distance, slow cardio, eating the wrong stuff. She straight up went vegan for a while. Like that's just kind of in many cases not going to be real good for you.
Yeah. So if you're working out hard, bro, you can't. It's not sustainable. It's not realistic.
But definitely awesome to hear from her and cool to sit down and talk with her. So there you go, Danica Patrick. Hey, speaking of getting on the path, like we're doing Def Reset. So this is going to start January 1st, but it actually starts immediately because if you're not in the game right now, you're not going to be ready for it when it comes. So that's what we're doing. We're going to be working out with Jason Khalipa. We're going to be doing leadership with Echelon Front. We're going to be doing discipline directives from me, fueled by Jocko Fuel. Check out thedefreset.com. Get registered. This is where you have the opportunity to change the trajectory of your next year. That's what you can do. Change the trajectory of your next year. You could be flat. You could be going down a little bit. You could be going up 3 degrees, or you could be going up 19 degrees, 24 degrees going up. That's what we're doing. Get better life, get better health, get better fitness, get on the path. thedefreset.com. We're all going to do it, and we're going to get some.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, by the way, when you're doing that, you're going to need fuel. Any recommendations?
Jocko Fuel. Jocko Fuel all day. So, and, I haven't shaken out the numbers or whatever, but, so how much do you have to eat protein-wise? If you just start with protein, how much do you, like Jocko, me, this guy, like individually, we all got to eat a certain amount of protein to get the amount of, to gain your muscle, if that's, the program.
Or maintain your muscle,
Yeah, and I think, and you might be different just because, actually, I'm different. I know I'm different because I got freaking primal freaking beef coming. I got all this stuff. So my access to steak is pretty abundant. But the normal person, it's not like that. It can actually be kind of hard to get that amount of protein. Like day after day after day, it's kind of hard. So I figure if you do the numbers, like we're on the Def Reset, we're lifting, we're doing all this stuff. You do the numbers as far as Jocko Fuel goes, the Molk, I would say that would be the number one thing you want.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the number one thing you want. Put that at the top of the list.
Like the difference between having it and not having it, to me, is going to be the biggest, I think, with Molk.
Bro, by the way, it's winter. And look, I know that in Southern California, winter doesn't hold a lot of weight if you're from Minnesota or you're from Maine. But let's face it, it's a little cooler out right now. And I'm back on that warm, or let's call it hot chocolate Molk in the morning.
Yeah. Wait, the RTD one or the mix?
No, the mix.
Oh, yeah.
The mix.
I dig it.
So, and here's a couple key components. Number one, heat the milk, then mix it with the Molk.
Okay.
That's component number one. Component number two, heavy whipping cream with monk fruit in it. Mix that up. You can make whipped cream, kind of like a keto whipped cream. And you put that in this. You might as well go to whatever. Do you like chocolate milk? Do you like hot chocolate?
I very much like hot chocolate.
Where's the best hot chocolate that you would get from a store?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
So, but you know when you go to certain coffee shops and you order a hot chocolate, it's really good.
Sure.
This be like that.
It'd be that level.
Yeah, that level. Dang, okay. I'm not kidding.
Restaurant level.
That level.
Okay.
Restaurant level. It's that good.
Okay.
So it's chocolate milk. Heat the milk up. Then add the chocolate. Mix it. Then put the heavy whipping cream with monk fruit that you made into whipped cream. Put it in there. You're gonna be. You will be 100%. 100% gratified and satisfied.
All right.
And you'll still be on the path, by the way. That's the crazy thing. You can be on the path.
Yeah.
While you're doing this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Christmas time. So Lonnie, my brother's girlfriend.
Yep.
She makes these homemade cookies, and they have I don't know what they got in there, but I know it's probably not that healthy. Insane. I know. I think there's Oreo chunks in there. There's marshmallows in there, and then it's homemade chocolate chip cookies, kind of a thing. She made a lot of them too. So yeah, when they're cruising there and they're in there, it's this is kind of a rare occasion. They're here or whatever. Anyway, to say no to that kind of stuff when it's in your house or whatever tends to be harder around the holidays, in my opinion. So if you got a substitute, then I think that's going to pay dividends. That's what I think.
That's what I'm telling you. So there you go. Hey, by the way, def reset, you're going to need hydrate. You're definitely going to want some go in the vicinity, right?
Yeah.
Super Krill.
Yeah.
Joint warfare because you're working hard. So there you go. Go to jockofuel.com. Get this stuff. Also, you can go to Vitamin Shop. You can go to Wawa. You can go to GNC, Military Commissaries, AFES, Hannaford, Dash Stores in Maryland, Wake Fern, ShopRite, HEB, Meyer, out there in the Midwest, HEB down there in Tejas, Harris Teeter, Lifetime Fitness, Shields, small gyms. Hey, if you go to a gym, which I hope you're going to a gym, you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're doing CrossFit, you're doing weightlifting, you're doing yoga. You could be doing yoga. If those gyms aren't selling Jocko Fuel and you want them to, tell the owner to email jfsales@jockofuel.com and we'll get you set up. That way, on the way in, you have a go. On the way out, you grab a hydrate. And then when you're in the car for the drive home, Molk, rebuild.
Oh, dear.
Got a plan for you. JockoFuel.com. Go get some.
Yep, it's true. Also, we're doing jiu-jitsu. If you don't have an origin gi for jiu-jitsu, get an origin gi. Do yourself that favor. Best gis in the world. Also made in America. One might think, we're focused on jiu-jitsu. We don't necessarily care about where the gi's made. We do care about where the gi's made. Because after you get off the mat, there's still a world out there. You want the world to be a good, fair, balanced place. What I'm saying, Origin, that's where they represent hard. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you can get rash guards, you can get T-shirts, you can get truckers' hats. You can get everything. You can get jeans, blue jeans.
Yep.
So go to originusa.com and support America. Support freedom. Never mind America, support freedom. You might be over in Europe right now. You can't buy in Europe. Maybe they're not making jeans anywhere in England. Maybe they're not making jeans anywhere in Germany. It's okay. You don't need to buy them from China, slave labor. You can buy them from Origin USA. That's what we're doing. OriginUSA.com. Go get some.
It's true. Also, Jocko has a store. If you want to represent discipline equals freedom while you're on this path, the idea of good you want to represent, this is where you get it. JockoStore.com. Some merch on there, some good stuff. Check it out if you like something, get something. Also, speaking of liking something, subscription scenario, new design on a shirt every single month. It's called the Shirt Locker.
Did you just post the deadlift video on YouTube?
Yeah.
Why? What made you decide to do that?
Because there's a campaign, like an email campaign. I was emailing everybody because over the years, Shirt Locker's been in service, whatever, in full swing for like 2 years already.
Dang.
So, people email, I like this one. If you're a member, you can buy the past shirts. So people would be like, hey, when's this one coming back? Not a random one, but one from a long time ago. Someone would be like, when is Small coming back in stock or whatever? And they'll a lot of the time anyway, they'll include, I really like this one. I really like this one. And people, when I see them, I really like this one. So it's like sorted itself out to have like a list of like the ones that everyone seemed to like the most. I call it Shirt Locker favorites. That's what I called it. So I emailed people, everyone on the email list that, hey, these are the shirt locker favorites. So look, if they're in Christmas time, something like that, they want to buy one for their friend, for their wife, husband, brother, whatever.
Is it illegal or immoral if I'm part of the shirt locker, but my wife isn't, and I order a shirt and I give it to her?
Yeah, that's kind of the whole gig. So no, it's not illegal. That's why I encourage that.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying? And you can buy ones from the past is what I'm saying. So if you're a member, you can go in there and you can buy whatever. So that's why I posted that video, because on the email it had that video as well. Sure. So it included some of the shirt locker favorites in the whole comprehensive
Was
message.
It a little bit of a humble brag to like put your big effects into it?
I was very happy with the way the video turned out. You know, you performed very well in that video.
Deadlifting. You know? My shirt change. Go watch the video. There you go. So JockoStore.com, shirt locker. We got it going on. Also ColoradoCraftBeef.com or PrimalBeef.com. Look, Echo said, hey, has steak in abundance.
Yep.
We can all have steak in abundance. Yep. So go to PrimalBeef.com, go to ColoradoCraftBeef.com and get yourself some steak. Some burgers, some beef hot dogs. Get it. That's what we're doing. It'll ship to your door in a good frozen package, and you'll be able to eat. It'll be a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. Subscribe to the podcast. Get JockoUnderground.com. It's a little separate podcast that we do. You can check that one out. It's also, we did that so we can have control over the platform, just to make sure we don't get kicked off and don't have anywhere to go. We'll have somewhere to go, always. The underground. YouTube. Check those out. Psychological Warfare, FlipsideCanvas.com, Dakota Meyer. Bunch of books. Obviously, you got Danica Patrick's books, Crossing the Line, and Pretty Intense. You can get those. Also, I've written a bunch of books. If you want to get those books, go get them. That's all there is to it. I recommend you check out the kids' books because you're going to have speaking of trajectory, like, look, you can change the trajectory of your life right now, and it'll be cool. It's going to have an impact. But you change the trajectory of a kid's life, and it changes so dramatically everything. So get those Warrior Kid books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Also, Echelon Front, we have a leadership consultancy. We solve problems through leadership. So go to echelonfront.com if you need help in your organization with anything. Anything that's going on in your organization that's not going the way you want it to go, it's a leadership problem. We solve problems through leadership. echelonfront.com. Also, we have an online training academy that teaches you to take ownership of your life. So check that out, extremeownership.com. Also, if you want to help service members, active and retired, you want to help their families, Gold Star families, check out Mark Lee's mom, Mama Lee. She's got a charity organization. If you want to donate or you want to get involved, go to americasmightywarriors.org. Also, don't forget about Micah Fink. He's up in the mountains. Actually, right now, factually, he is gone dark. He texted me. He's like, hey, you're not going to hear from me for a month.
Sure.
I'll be off all electronic devices. Mm-hmm. He's probably right now gnawing on the femur of a bear.
Sure, of course.
Out in the wilderness. So check that out as well. Also, if you want to connect with Danica, once again, on the interwebs, she's got DanicaPatrick.com. And on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, she's at Danica Patrick. She was like in the time where she got it all, right? Yeah. She got her, what's it called? Her URL.
Yeah.
She got all of her handles.
Yep, that's legit.
That's hard to do this day and age.
Yeah. Especially with, well, it depends on your name, I guess, right? But yeah. I got mine.
Yeah.
All mine.
Danica is a unique enough name, right?
I think it's kind of at the border, though. Like to get everything, and it's just my opinion.
But I think that's timing, right? Because she was around 2004, 2005. Yeah. She just got each. I wonder if she did that or if someone was savvy.
Yeah.
You know? Be interesting. I have Jocko.com and I have at Jocko Willink, at Jocko Willink. Like, it's the same on everything.
Yeah.
The only thing that's a little bit confusing is Jocko Podcast, at Jocko Podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know who has that one.
You do. We do. That's ours. Ours is Jocko Podcast.
It is?
Yeah, the YouTube channel.
Okay. There you go. I thought it was Jocko Podcast Official.
Oh, okay.
But it could be.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's how you connect with Danica. Also, Echo is at Echo Charles. I'm at Jocko Willink. Just watch out for the algorithm. Because you heard me. Like, my algorithm's just rack filled now.
Yeah, man.
With Danica Patrick crashes.
It's real.
Danica Patrick victory. Danica Patrick yelling.
Yep.
Danica Patrick crashing. Like that's all that's getting fed now.
Yeah.
Danica Patrick interview. So the algorithm, it's tracking you.
Mm-hmm.
So just be careful. Don't get sucked into the algorithm. And thanks once again to Danica for joining us today, sharing her life lessons. And thanks to all the military personnel out there around the globe, putting yourselves in harm's way to protect our way of life. We thank you. And also thanks to our police, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, correctional officers, Border Patrol, Secret Service, and all first responders. Thank you for serving and protecting us here at home. We are grateful. And to everyone else out there, it's a scrap. It's a scrap. You can't expect anything to be given to you. You have to work for it. And here's the thing, even when you work for it, there's no guarantees. Even then, there are risks. But the biggest risk there is not taking any risk at all. So, put your helmet on and go get after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko out.